The first thing Marianne noticed was not the chandeliers, the string quartet, or the silence that followed when a duchess entered a room where half the women had already decided she did not belong. It was the number 27. The blue enamel forget-me, not brooch, rested against the black wool of a widow's cloak near the far end of the ladies' retiring room. Marianne would not have looked twice if another woman had not turned at that exact moment and revealed the same small silver number fastened beneath her collar. Then a third woman stepped away from the mirror, one gloved hand pressed over an identical flower. 3 women, 1 number. None of them looked at one another. London, 1864, had taught Marianne that people avoided the truth in many ways. Some laughed. Some changed the subject. Some lowered their voices and called silence discretion. These women had chosen stillness. It made them easier to notice. Behind the closed doors, the annual ball of the Stroud Ladies' Benevolent Society moved through its polished beginning. Carriages had been arriving for nearly an hour. Noble patrons filled the ballroom beneath crystal chandeliers. The society banner hung above the musicians, embroidered with a motto about dignity, protection, and useful work. Marianne knew every word. Years ago, when she had been paid by the week to copy scores, teach singing, and arrange the society's concerts, she had helped choose the thread. No one had placed her name beneath the finished banner. A maid approached to take Marianne's cloak. She surrendered it, then glanced toward the widow in black. The woman had turned her body toward the wall. The second beneficiaire pretended to adjust her bonnet ribbons. The youngest stood near a chair with her hands clenched at her waist. All 3 brooches showed 27. "Your Grace?" the maid asked. Marianne realized she had not moved. "Thank you." Her voice remained even. She crossed toward the mirror, as though intending to examine the fall of her dark green silk gown. The color had been Julian's choice, though he had presented it as a question rather than a decision. He had said it made her eyes look less guarded. She had told him that eyes did not become less guarded because a dressmaker used expensive fabric. He had answered that he knew. Now, in the mirror, Marianne saw the youngest woman watching her. The girl could not have been more than 20. Her gown was plain grey, altered at the sleeves and carefully brushed. The blue flower at her throat was almost hidden beneath lace. Marianne turned slightly. "That is a pretty brooch." The young woman's face lost color. "It's nothing, Your Grace. The enamel is well done. I wouldn't know. You are wearing it. Only tonight." The answer came too quickly. The woman beside the wall shifted. Marianne saw the silver number again. 27. "Were they issued for the ball?" Marianne asked. The young woman looked toward the door. "Please, I don't wish to cause trouble. I did not say that you had." "No, Your Grace." A rustle sounded near the chair. Something small struck the carpet. The youngest woman flinched as though a glass had shattered. Marianne looked down. A 4th blue forget-me knot lay beside the hem of her gown. She bent and picked it up before the maid could reach it. The flower was cool in her palm. On the back, engraved in tiny numbers, was 27. The young woman took 1 step forward, then stopped. "Please, don't let them know you saw it." Her voice had dropped to a whisper. Marianne closed her fingers over the brooch. "Who are they?" The girl shook her head. "I can't say, cannot or will not. There's no difference here." The words were so quiet that Marianne almost missed them. Across the room, the widow in black moved toward the door. The second woman followed without looking back. The youngest remained trapped between Marianne and whatever waited beyond the ballroom. Marianne lowered her voice. Does this number belong to you? Tonight it does. And tomorrow. Fear entered the girl's eyes. Tomorrow depends on whether I disappoint them. The door opened before Marianne could ask another question. Lady Octavia Stroud entered in silver-grey silk, her posture exact and her smile formed before she had seen anyone's face. She was a handsome woman in her early 50s, with dark hair arranged beneath a diamond comb and the measured authority of someone who had spent years deciding which kinds of suffering deserved sympathy. Her gaze passed over the maid, the departing widow, the young woman, and finally Marianne's closed hand. "Your Grace," she said. At last, Marianne did not open her fingers. "Lady Octavia, the ballroom has been waiting. I was not aware that it had been delayed." Not delayed, anticipating. Lady Octavia looked at the young woman. "Miss Mercer, the musicians require you." So the girl had a name. Anne Mercer curtsied. "Yes, my lady. And your token?" Anne touched the empty place at her throat. Her breath stopped. Lady Octavia's gaze moved to Marianne's hand. "Have you found something?" "A question," Marianne said. "How fortunate. Tonight's program is designed to answer several." Lady Octavia extended her hand. "The item, if you please." Marianne met her eyes. "You have not identified it. Anything dropped in these rooms belongs to the society until properly returned. A broad rule, a necessary one." Anne stood utterly still. Marianne could feel the girl waiting for her decision. Years earlier, Marianne had often waited in the same way, while committee women discussed wages, lodging, references, and conduct as if the woman affected were not present. The memory sharpened her refusal. "Then the society may claim it," after explaining why 4 women have been given the same number. Lady Octavia's smile did not vanish. It became more careful. Beneficiaries occasionally exchange garments. 4 brooches. You have always possessed an energetic imagination, and you have always preferred an ordinary explanation before the facts require. 1. Anne drew a breath. Lady Octavia did not look at her. "Miss Mercer, go to the musicians." Anne hesitated. Marianne stepped aside, giving her a clear path to the door. "You may go," she said. It was not permission. It was release. Anne passed between them. As she did, her eyes dropped to Marianne's closed hand. Then she disappeared into the corridor. Lady Octavia waited until the door shut. "You have been away from charitable administration for some years, Your Grace. Certain methods may appear unfamiliar. I remember the methods well. Then, you remember that discretion protects women. Discretion from whom? From society. We are standing inside society." For the first time, irritation touched Lady Octavia's face. "Tonight is not the occasion for one of your old disputes." Then, perhaps, you should not have placed an old dispute around the throat of 3 frightened women. Lady Octavia's gaze hardened. 3. Marianne understood at once. She had not said the 4th brooch had been worn. Lady Octavia had assumed it. The mistake lasted less than a second, but it was enough. "You know how many there are," Marianne said. "I know how many beneficiaries were expected." "All wearing 27? You are drawing conclusions from decoration." "Then let me see the register." "No." The answer came before politeness could cover it. Lady Octavia recovered. "The register is confidential, yet the brooches are displayed, only to those trained to understand them. The women wearing them appear trained to fear them." Lady Octavia's eyes moved toward the ballroom doors. "Your husband is waiting. Julian knows how to wait. A rare quality in a duke, a rarer one in a committee chairwoman." The maid lowered her gaze to hide a reaction. Lady Octavia drew in a slow breath. "The society has prepared a tribute. Subscribers have come to see what their generosity made possible. Marianne felt the old coldness settle beneath her ribs. What did their generosity make possible? Your elevation. The word was smooth, almost benevolent. It carried the weight of every unpaid hour Marianne had spent copying music beside a failing stove. My work made survival possible, she said. Marriage altered my title. And your circumstances? Yes. Marianne did not deny it. She had promised herself long ago that shame would never make her lie about poverty. But not my worth. Lady Octavia's smile returned. No one intends to question your worth. Then, why does the ballroom require a demonstration of it? A distant change in the music announced the end of the opening set. Lady Octavia turned toward the door. Come. The longer you remain here, the more people will imagine you are reluctant to be seen. Marianne slipped the fourth brooch into her handkerchief. Perhaps I am reluctant to be displayed. Only those who remain uncertain of their place object to being recognized. Recognition and exhibition are not the same. Lady Octavia opened the door. Light and music spilled into the corridor. Across the crowded ballroom, Marianne saw the presentation board standing near the society banner. A painted forget-me, not framed the words, "From dependence to distinction." Beneath it, in decorative script, was the description of a penniless music mistress raised through benevolence and noble marriage. Marianne's name had not been printed. It did not need to be. Guests were already looking from the board to her. Viola Stroud stood beside it, holding a silver pointer. Her face was composed, but her grip was too tight. Then Julian saw Marianne. He had been speaking with an elderly trustee near the musicians. The moment his gaze settled upon her, the conversation ended. He crossed the ballroom without haste, yet people moved aside before him. Tall, dark-haired, and severe in evening black, the Duke of Everdon possessed the kind of rank that made others assume every movement carried judgment. Marianne knew better. His attention rarely announced itself. It gathered details. He stopped before her and looked first at her face, then at Lady Octavia, then at the handkerchief folded in her left hand. "Do you wish to leave?" he asked. He did not ask what had happened. He did not tell her the room was beneath notice. He offered a choice. Marianne looked past him at the board, at Viola and at Anne Mercer standing near the musicians without a brooch at her throat. The widow in black had taken a place near the rear doors. The second woman was nowhere in sight. "Not before I know why they expect me to be ashamed," Marianne said. Julian held her gaze for one quiet beat. Then he offered his arm. She placed her hand upon it. Together they entered the ballroom. Lady Octavia moved ahead of them and accepted a champagne glass from a footman. Viola lifted the silver pointer toward the board. Conversation softened. Fans stilled. Anne Mercer lowered her eyes. Marianne felt the hidden brooch press against her palm through the handkerchief. Lady Octavia raised her glass. "My friends, tonight we honor the most fortunate recipient our charity has ever produced." Her smile widened as every face turned toward Marianne, the Duke of Everdon's own charity bride. For one suspended moment, no one in the ballroom moved. Lady Octavia's glass remained raised. Viola's silver pointer hovered beside the presentation board. The quartet let the final chord of the previous dance fade without beginning another. Marianne stood with her hand resting on Julian's arm and felt the entire room attempt to decide whether the insult had been elegant enough to excuse. A few guests smiled uncertainly. Others looked toward Julian, as though a duke's expression would tell them whether cruelty had occurred. Marianne did not look at him. She looked at Lady Octavia. You speak of elevation, she said. Her voice carried farther than she expected. Yet I was under the impression that tonight's purpose was to raise funds, not to lower people. A murmur passed through the room. Lady Octavia lowered her glass by an inch. My dear Duchess, no one has lowered you. We celebrate the distance you have travelled. By describing where I began as something shameful. By demonstrating what benevolence can accomplish. Marianne turned toward the presentation board. The painted forget-me-nots were delicate. The wording beneath them was not. From dependence to distinction. A penniless music mistress elevated through charity and noble marriage. The phrase had been arranged with enough care to seem official. It erased wages, skill, hunger, late nights, and every woman Marianne had helped before anyone thought to praise her. Who wrote this? She asked. Viola's hand tightened around the pointer. I copied the final wording. From whose draft? Viola looked at her aunt. Lady Octavia answered before she could. The committee approved it. Then the committee should have asked whether its triumph wished to be displayed. You misunderstand the intention. No, I understand it very well. Marianne stepped closer to the board. Julian moved with her, but did not draw her back. I am meant to stand here in silk and diamonds, so subscribers may believe their coins transformed an obedient object into a duchess. Lady Octavia's smile thinned. That is an unnecessarily bitter interpretation. Is it inaccurate? You came to us in reduced circumstances. I came to work. You received assistance. I received wages, often late. Several older women in the room shifted. Some of them had attended the concerts Marianne arranged. One had once praised a performance without knowing Marianne had spent the previous night copying 6 missing orchestral parts by hand. The society gave you opportunity, Lady Octavia said. The society gave me tasks, Marianne replied. I taught pupils, I copied music, I rehearsed singers, I found lodging. When the committee forgot to release funds, work is not a moral debt. Near the edge of the room, one of the society's patronesses looked directly at Marianne, then turned away as if suddenly occupied by the flowers. The small rejection hurt more than Marianne wished to admit. This woman had once invited her to tea after Julian announced their engagement. Now she was unwilling to be seen agreeing with her. Rank had opened doors. It had not erased the memory of which side of those doors Marianne had once waited upon. Lady Octavia noticed the patroness turn away. Satisfaction softened her expression. No one denies that you worked. We merely recognize that labor alone did not alter your circumstances. Neither did charity alone. Marriage did. The word landed precisely where Lady Octavia intended. Marianne felt the hidden brooch inside her handkerchief press against her palm. Anne Mercer stood near the musicians with her hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles showed white beneath her gloves. The widow in black had moved closer to the rear doors. A third woman, older and grey-haired, watched Marianne without blinking. All of them were listening to hear whether poverty would be denied, forgiven, or used as a chain. Marianne lifted her chin. Yes, she said. Marriage altered my circumstances. The room quieted again. I ate more regularly. I no longer feared a landlord's notice. I no longer calculated whether coal or bread would last through the week. She saw the smallest movement in Julian's face. Not pity, but pain at hearing details she had rarely given him. Those are facts. I will not lie about them so that others may find me more respectable. But poverty did not make me dishonest, foolish, or without worth, and wealth did not create the woman standing here. Lady Octavia's gaze cooled. You seem determined to resent generosity. I resent generosity only when it arrives with a permanent claim upon the recipient's obedience. A few fans stopped moving. Viola lowered the pointer slightly. Marianne saw that her face had gone pale. Lady Octavia turned toward the audience with a practiced appeal. You see how sensitive gratitude may become when it is confused by pride. Do not name my self-respect for me. The words came quietly, but they cut through every whisper. Lady Octavia looked back at her. Your Grace, I would never presume. You have done nothing else this evening. A man's voice came from behind the first row. Marianne. Sir Crispin Elmsley approached with the grave concern of a relative arriving to manage an embarrassment. He was silver-haired, elegantly dressed, and careful never to hurry in public. His composure had once persuaded Marianne that he knew how to save the Elmsley family after her father's ruin. Years had taught her that Crispin's calm often appeared before someone else lost a choice. My dear girl, he said, surely this has gone far enough. Marianne's hand tightened on Julian's sleeve. Do not call me that. Crispin stopped. The nearest guests pretended not to hear. You are upset, I am accurate. Lady Octavia has spent years protecting women who had nowhere else to turn. Then she should know better than to use need as entertainment. Crispin gave Julian an apologetic glance, as though Marianne were a difficult family matter they must jointly contain. Your Grace, you must forgive her. The subject touches old wounds. Julian's expression did not change. My wife does not require forgiveness for answering an insult. Crispin's smile faltered. Of course not. I meant only that family hardship can distort memory. Whose memory? Marianne asked. Perhaps you were very young when your father's affairs collapsed. You cannot recall every obligation I assumed. I remember enough. I paid creditors who would have taken your mother's furniture, and reminded her of it until she stopped asking what you had sold. Crispin's eyes sharpened. The remark was quieter than the others, but Julian heard it. So did Lady Octavia. This is neither the time nor place, Crispin said. You have used that sentence whenever the truth inconvenienced you. He took one step closer. Give me the handkerchief. Marianne went still. Why? Because you are holding society property. Lady Octavia had not told him what she had found. Not within Marianne's hearing. Crispin's gaze had fixed on the folded linen before he could have seen the brooch inside it. How do you know what I am holding? She asked. Lady Octavia's concern made it obvious. She did not name the object. Do not be childish. He reached for her hand. Marianne pulled it back before his fingers touched the linen. You're not to touch what is mine. Julian moved between them with such restraint that the shift might have appeared accidental to anyone who had not seen Crispin's hand. It was not accidental. He did not raise his voice. My wife has answered you. Crispin's face altered by a degree. This is a family matter. You reached for the Duchess of Everdon after she refused you. She is my niece. She is not your possession. Marianne felt the words settle beside her own. Julian had not described her as fragile. He had described a boundary. Crispin withdrew his hand. The token belongs to the society. Marianne looked at him over Julian's shoulder. You have not seen it. I know their design. From the shape beneath folded linen, from years of involvement. Then perhaps you can explain why 4 women were issued number 27. The question struck him, cleanly. His expression remained controlled, but the color beneath his eyes changed. 4, Lady Octavia said. Marianne turned toward her. Another mistake. Crispin and Lady Octavia had each revealed a different kind of knowledge. You both seem surprised by the number in different ways, Marianne said. Crispin recovered first. Beneficiary tokens are reused. After what? After women leave the program. Or die. His gaze flickered. It was enough. Before Marianne could press further, Lady Octavia stepped between the conversation and the room. This evening is becoming grotesque. A small administrative matter has been transformed into accusation because Her Grace dislikes the language of gratitude. Then remove the board, Marianne said. Lady Octavia glanced toward Viola. The board remains. Why? Because it is true. Marianne looked again at the phrase penniless music mistress. She remembered hunger sharp enough to make music difficult. She remembered copying notes by candlelight after her fingers stiffened. She remembered girls sleeping two to a bed while subscribers praised the society's refined concerts. It is incomplete, she said, and incompleteness arranged to flatter power is another kind of lie. Crispin gave a weary sigh. Marianne, His Grace saved you from a life no woman would choose. He saved all of us from further embarrassment. Surely gratitude is not too much to ask. Gratitude for what? Security, position, a name beyond reproach. My name was not a disgrace before I married. Elmsley carried debts. Debts are not sins inherited through blood. Crispin's voice lowered. You would have had nothing without his intervention. Marianne felt the room lean toward the answer. This was the story society preferred. A poor woman had nothing. A duke gave everything. Therefore, every dignity afterward belonged partly to him. There is no dishonor in receiving help, she said. There is dishonor in using help as a chain. There is dishonor in reminding a person of hunger each time she raises her head. There is dishonor in calling labor gratitude, because paying for it would require admitting its value. The widow near the rear doors bowed her head. Anne Mercer looked at Marianne with something close to hope. Lady Octavia saw both reactions. Her expression sharpened. You speak as though the society has committed some offense. I have made no accusation about your accounts. Crispin's face paled. Marianne saw it. Not yet, she added. The words had scarcely left her when Viola's pointer slipped from her hand and struck the floor. The sound rang across the ballroom. She bent to retrieve it, but Lady Octavia did not look at her niece. She looked at Julian. Surely, Your Grace, you do not deny that compassion placed her at your side. The question was offered with perfect courtesy. Its cruelty lay in the certainty that rank would restore the story Lady Octavia had prepared. The ballroom became still. Even the musicians seemed afraid to breathe. Julian looked first at Lady Octavia, then at Crispin, then at the presentation board that had reduced Marianne's life to a decorative sentence. At last, he looked at Marianne. He did not speak over her. He waited until she met his eyes. Only then did he turn back to the room and prepare to answer. Julian did not answer at once. He let Lady Octavia's question remain in the air until it lost the protection of elegance and revealed itself for what it was. The ballroom had gone so still that Marianne could hear the faint crackle of candle wicks above them. Lady Octavia's glass was still raised. Crispin stood with one hand resting against the back of a chair. His posture composed, though his face had lost color. Viola had recovered the silver pointer, but had not returned it to the board. Julian looked at Marianne once more before he spoke. The glance was not permission. It was recognition. Compassion did not place my wife at my side, he said. His voice was quiet enough to force the room to listen. Respect did. No one moved. Julian turned toward the presentation board. Before Marianne carried the Locksley name, she spent 3 years doing work. This society praised only after someone else attached a title to it. She copied music when the committee had failed to pay the copyists. She rehearsed pupils others had abandoned. She found lodging when subscribers believed their signatures had already provided it. Lady Octavia lowered her glass by another inch. No one denies that she was useful. Julian looked at her. Useful is the word powerful people choose when they wish to benefit from devotion without honoring the person who gives it. A murmur began near the rear of the ballroom, then died when he continued. 3 young women would have been turned into the street during one winter because their lodging account had been delayed. Marianne used wages she could not spare to keep them housed until the society released money it had already promised. Marianne felt the old scene rise before her. Rain on the broken pane, the landlord standing in the passage. 3 pupils sharing one blanket because the coal had run out. Julian had arrived that night, expecting to inspect a concert funded by House Locksley. He had found her blocking the doorway and refusing to let the landlord remove their trunks. She had not known then that he would remember every detail. She did not apply for rescue, Julian said. She did not ask to be displayed as evidence of another person's goodness. She worked while others used the word charity to excuse what they had failed to do. Crispin attempted a grave smile. Your Grace, surely this is unnecessary. Marianne's efforts have never been in question. Julian turned his gaze upon him. You questioned them when you called her life nothing before my intervention. Crispin's smile disappeared. I spoke as family. You spoke as a man accustomed to defining what others owe him. The words landed without heat. That made them harsher. Lady Octavia set her glass upon a passing tray. Your Grace, the society has never claimed ownership of the Duchess. You placed her history on a board without her consent. You called her marriage the result of your benevolence. You asked whether compassion placed her beside me. Those are not the acts of people who understand the difference between assistance and possession. The patroness who had turned away from Marianne earlier now looked down at her fan. Viola's fingers tightened around the pointer until her knuckles whitened. Anne Mercer stood near the musicians, watching Julian with an expression Marianne could not yet read. Hope, perhaps, or fear that hope itself would be punished. Julian faced the room. You call her my charity bride because you cannot imagine a poor woman giving more than she receives. Marianne stopped breathing. He did not look at her as he said the next words. He looked at the people who had accepted her labor and called it gratitude. The charity in this marriage was hers. She gave my house a conscience it had not earned. Silence followed. Not admiration, not yet. Something more uncomfortable, recognition. Marianne felt it move through the room as guests remembered concerts Marianne had arranged, pupils she had introduced, errors she had repaired before the patrons arrived. A grey-haired woman near the rear doors lowered her head and covered her mouth. Lady Octavia remained upright, but the expression she had prepared for triumph was gone. No one applauded. Applause would have turned the moment into entertainment. Silence left the accusation where it belonged. Julian turned toward Marianne. The severity in his face softened, though he did not reach for her. Will you grant me the first dance, Your Grace? The question mattered. He could have offered protection as spectacle. Instead, he asked her to choose before the room that had tried to define her choices. Marianne felt every eye upon her. If she refused, society would call it discord. If she accepted too quickly, they would call it gratitude. She looked at Julian, not at them. I will. He bowed. She placed her right hand in his, while keeping the folded handkerchief secure in her left. The quartet began a waltz after an uncertain pause. Other couples hesitated to join the floor. For the first several measures, Marianne and Julian moved almost alone beneath the chandeliers. His hand rested at the proper place against her back. The pressure was steady, never possessive. "You said more than we agreed," Marianne murmured. "I know. You told them about the pupils. I did not name them. That wasn't my concern." Julian guided her through a turn. "What was? That your praise will become another form of protection. They will say, 'I am honorable because you declared it.' They had already heard you. They preferred your authority. Then I used it to make their refusal visible." Marianne looked past his shoulder. Lady Octavia was speaking to Crispin in a low voice. Viola remained beside the presentation board, but had lowered the pointer to her side. "That is a dangerous habit," Marianne said, "using rank whenever someone refuses to hear me." "I know." The admission came without defense. It unsettled her more than argument would have, and yet you did it. Because you had answered them, and they chose not to listen. I will not let them turn your labor into proof of inferiority. The waltz carried them past the musicians. Anne Mercer had moved one step back from the edge of the platform. Marianne saw no brooch at her throat. "You made it sound as though you understood me before I did," Marianne said. "I did not understand you at first. What did you think? That you were insubordinate?" Marianne almost smiled. "I was. Yes, that was the first thing I respected. Not admired? Not yet. When did admiration begin?" Julian's gaze held hers through the next turn. "When I learned you had sold the only valuable brooch you owned to keep 3 pupils housed." Marianne missed half a step. Julian adjusted without drawing attention to it. "Who told you?" "The pawnbroker sent the society a receipt after the lodging account was finally settled." "You never mentioned it. You never asked me to praise you for it." "That does not answer the question." "No," his voice lowered. "I kept the knowledge because I did not know what right I had to it." Marianne looked away. The answer was too intimate for a ballroom. Julian had known the cost of that night and had chosen not to turn it into a debt between them. "You said respect placed me at your side," she said. "Was that the whole truth?" "No." The answer came immediately. Her pulse changed. "Then why did you marry me?" The question escaped before caution could stop it. Julian's hand shifted slightly at her back as the dance turned them away from the audience. For one measure, the room seemed to recede, "because every room became more honest when you entered it," he said. Marianne could not answer. It was not a declaration of love. That should have made it safer. Instead, the restraint gave the words greater weight. She felt the folded handkerchief press against her palm. The mystery returned before emotion could overtake judgment. "Julian," she said, "the brooch." His attention sharpened at once. "Show me. Not here. Then tell me what you saw." 3 women wore the same number in the retiring room. A 4th brooch fell to the floor. "Which number?" 27. His step altered by the smallest fraction. No one else would have noticed. Marianne did. "You know it." "I know the annual report." "Whose number was it?" Julian looked over her shoulder toward the rear doors. "Evelina Frost, a music copyist. Where is she now?" "According to the report, she died in Bristol 2 years ago." The words settled between them with greater force than the insult had done. Marianne looked toward Anne Mercer. The young woman was no longer near the musicians. The widow in black remained beside the rear doors. But the blue flower had vanished beneath the folds of her cloak. The 3rd woman, older and grey-haired, had turned away from the dance floor. "Then someone is wearing the identity of a dead woman," Marianne said. More than one person. The music carried them through another turn. Crispin was watching Marianne over the rim of his glass. Lady Octavia stood beside him, her face composed again, but one hand was clenched around her fan. Viola looked toward the corridor leading to the committee rooms. When Marianne caught her gaze, Viola gave the smallest shake of her head. Warning, not denial. "The youngest woman is gone," Marianne said. "Anne Mercer." "You know her name?" "Lady Octavia used it in the retiring room." "Did Anne say the number belonged to her?" "She said it belonged to her tonight." Julian's jaw hardened. "And tomorrow?" "Depends on whether she disappoints them." The waltz neared its end. Marianne felt the room beginning to breathe again. Guests preparing to pretend the evening could continue. "Do you wish to leave now?" Julian asked. The same question. The same refusal to decide for her. Marianne looked toward the corridor where Anne had disappeared. "No. What do you need?" "A reason to enter the committee room before Lady Octavia removes whatever remains. I can provide one." "Not as Duke," his mouth nearly curved. "You object to my rank when it is useful." "I object when it arrives before my judgment." Then led. The final chord sounded. Julian stepped back and bowed. Marianne curtsied. Before either could move, Viola crossed the floor toward them. Her face was pale, and the silver pointer trembled in her hand. "Your Grace," she said to Marianne, "one of the display cards has been placed in the wrong order. Would you examine it with me in the committee room?" Lady Octavia turned at once. "Viola, that can wait." Viola did not look at her aunt. "I don't believe it can." Marianne offered Julian her arm rather than waiting for his. "Then we should correct it." As they moved toward the corridor, a footman entered through the side doors and spoke quietly to Lady Octavia. Her expression changed before she could hide it. Marianne followed the direction of the footman's glance. Anne Mercer was slipping through the rear entrance beneath a borrowed black cloak. By the time Marianne reached the committee room door, the young woman had vanished into the London night. The committee room door had barely closed behind them when Viola released the handle and pressed one hand to the wood as though she feared someone might force it open from the other side. The room was narrow, lined with shelves of bound programs, correspondence boxes, and ledgers whose labels faced outward in neat black script. A single oil lamp burned on the central table. Its light made the shadows between the shelves look deeper than they were. Marianne did not ask at once why Viola had brought them there. She placed the folded handkerchief on the table and waited. Julian remained near the door, not blocking it, but close enough that no one could enter without passing him. Viola looked first at Marianne, then at the handkerchief. "There are 2 lists," she said. Marianne felt Julian's attention sharpen beside her. 2 lists of what? Beneficiaries. Why? One is shown to subscribers. The other is used for payments. Do the names match? Viola did not answer. That was answer enough. Marianne unfolded the handkerchief and revealed the blue enamel brooch marked 27. Viola took one step back. "You knew this number," Marianne said. "I knew it appeared more than once. You told me nothing in the ballroom. My aunt was watching. She is always watching. That doesn't make it easier." Viola's voice broke, then steadied. "I copied names for the public programs. Sometimes I was told to replace one with another. I thought it was for discretion." "Whose discretion?" Julian asked. "The women's, I was told." "And now?" Marianne said. Viola looked at the brooch. "Now I'm not certain." Marianne touched the edge of the table. "Where is the private list?" "Not here tonight." "Who removed it?" "Sir Crispin usually takes it before the annual ball." Julian's face changed by a degree. Why? He says confidential records shouldn't remain where servants and musicians pass. Convenient, Marianne said. Viola flinched. I'm not defending him. You are defending yourself. Perhaps. The honesty made Marianne look at her more closely. Viola was frightened, but she was not innocent of every choice. The silver pointer still trembled in her hand. What did you mean when you said the display card was wrong? Marianne asked. Nothing. I needed a reason to bring you away. Why help me? Because my aunt meant to keep you on that floor until you either thanked her or lost your temper. And you objected. Too late. Viola looked down. I copied the board. Marianne let the admission stand without softening it. Yes, you did. Viola swallowed. I thought if I followed instructions, she would stop asking questions about the duplicate entries. Did she? No. Footsteps sounded in the corridor. Viola went pale. Julian moved one pace closer to the door, but Marianne raised her hand slightly. Do not intervene unless I ask. His eyes met hers. Agreed. The door opened without a knock. Lady Octavia entered first. Crispin followed. His gaze went directly to the brooch on the table. Lady Octavia closed the door behind them with deliberate care. Viola, she said, return to the ballroom. I asked her Grace to examine a card. You lied badly. I still asked. Lady Octavia looked at Marianne. This room contains confidential society property. Then, perhaps you should explain why that property is being worn by 4 women under 1 number. You persist in misunderstanding an administrative matter. Then, correct me. Marianne lifted the brooch between 2 fingers. Who is 27? Lady Octavia's eyes flickered. Crispin answered before she could. Beneficiary numbers are reassigned when circumstances change. After marriage? Marianne asked. Sometimes. After departure? Yes. After death? Crispin paused. When necessary. Julian looked toward him. Necessary for whom? Crispin ignored the question. Marianne, give me the brooch. No, you have no right to retain it. You recognized it before. Seeing the number, I recognized the design. From folded linen. Do not be absurd. He reached toward the table. Marianne placed her palm over the brooch. You're not to touch it. Julian did not move. He did not need to. Crispin saw him watching and withdrew his hand. Lady Octavia turned to Viola. What have you told them? That there are 2 lists. The answer came with visible effort. Lady Octavia's face remained composed, but the silence after it was too long. There are many reasons for separate records. Then why does Sir Crispin remove one before the ball? Marianne asked. Because donors are careless with curiosity, and beneficiaries are expected to be careful with fear. Lady Octavia's mouth tightened. You have always confused discipline with cruelty. Only when discipline is demanded from those with the least power. This society fed women who would otherwise have starved, and employed women whose work you later called charity. You were paid, late. You were housed, temporarily. You were recommended, conditionally. The old words rose between them, each one a polished version of dependence. Crispin stepped forward. This is becoming personal. Marianne looked at him. You placed my life on a board. Lady Octavia did, and you stood beside it until I asked the wrong question. His expression cooled. Lady Octavia turned toward Julian. Your Grace, surely you understand the danger of allowing emotion to dictate inquiry. Julian's reply was calm. I understand the danger of allowing authority to prevent it. Then you intend to support this. I intend to support my wife's right to ask what concerns her, even if she damages an institution hundreds rely upon. Marianne answered before he could. I do not intend to destroy what women need. I intend to discover whether their need is being used against them. Lady Octavia's gaze settled on the brooch. 4 women do not prove corruption. No, Marianne said, but your refusal to explain them proves fear. For the first time, Lady Octavia lost control of her expression. The break lasted only an instant, but Marianne saw it. Not confusion, recognition. You know how many were issued, Marianne said. I know how many were expected tonight. All under 27. Lady Octavia said nothing. Viola's hand tightened around the pointer. Crispin moved toward the shelves. This discussion is over. For tonight, Marianne said. Not entirely. You no longer work here. No, which means I no longer risk losing wages by asking why records do not match. Lady Octavia opened the door. Return to the ballroom, Viola. Viola looked at Marianne, then at her aunt, in a moment. The answer was small, but it was the first refusal Marianne had heard from her. Lady Octavia's face hardened. You will regret mistaking defiance for independence. Marianne folded the brooch back into the handkerchief. She may, but the choice should still be hers. Lady Octavia left. Crispin followed more slowly. At the threshold, he looked back at Marianne. Some questions expose more than the person asking intends. Then you should be careful which answers you hide. His gaze dropped to her handkerchief once more before the door closed. Viola let out a breath. You should leave before my aunt sends someone to search the room. Is there anything here worth searching? Marianne asked. Viola glanced toward a locked cabinet beneath the window. Not tonight. And tomorrow? I don't know. Find out. Viola looked frightened again. You speak as though I can simply choose. You can choose. That does not mean the choice is safe. Marianne picked up the brooch. Those are not the same thing. Julian offered his arm only after Marianne turned toward him. She took it. In the carriage, London passed in blurred reflections across the rain-dark glass. For several minutes, neither spoke. Julian sat opposite her, his hands resting loosely over the silver head of his cane. He did not ask for the brooch. He did not ask what she intended to do. Marianne held the handkerchief in her lap and felt the number beneath the linen. You knew Evelina Frost's name from the annual report, she said at last. Yes. Did you know anything else? Julian looked toward the window. A trustee sent a sealed notice 3 weeks ago regarding old beneficiary records. I had not opened it. Marianne's gaze sharpened. Why not? It was marked confidential and addressed to House Locksley as a subscriber. I intended to review it with you because you knew the society better than I did. You still have it? Yes. At Everdon House, in my study. Marianne looked down. Then we open it tomorrow, if you wish. She rubbed her thumb over the edge of the handkerchief. The motion caught against the small key fastened inside her reticule, her mother's music box key. She had carried it for years, without thinking about its weight. Suddenly she remembered Margaret Elmsley, seated beside a narrow kitchen table, turning the brass collar of a rosewood conducting baton with the tip of a hairpin. Marianne had been 12. She had asked what her mother was doing. Margaret had smiled and said she was hiding pencil slips where no careless committee secretary would find them. Marianne's breath changed. Julian noticed. What is it? My mother had a baton. The rosewood one? Yes. You brought it to Everdon House. I did. She looked toward him. The brass collar opens. You are certain? I had forgotten until now. The memory came with another, less welcome. Her mother placing the baton inside the music box after receiving a blue-edged envelope from Stroud Society. Number 27 had appeared on one of Margaret's programs. though Marianne had never understood why. "My mother received assistance from the society," she said. Julian did not move. Margaret Elmsley? Yes. Was she 27? I don't know. The admission hurt more than certainty might have done, but the number appeared beside her work on an old program. "Why did you never tell me?" "Because I knew what people would make of it. They would say need passed from mother to daughter. They would call dependence hereditary." Julian's expression held no pity. "I won't tell anyone unless you ask me to, even if the record protects me. Even then." Marianne looked at him. "You made that promise quickly." "No, I made it carefully." The carriage slowed before Everdon House. She looked again at the key in her reticule. "There is something you should remember before. Tomorrow." "What?" "When we married, you insisted my wages, papers, and personal effects be placed under a separate settlement." "Yes. Why?" Julian answered without hesitation. "Because marriage should not make your independence illegal." The words struck deeper than she expected. In 1864, most husbands would have called such a settlement unnecessary. Julian had called it prudent. Marianne had thought it generosity. Now she understood it had been respect before either of them had named the feeling between them. The carriage stopped. Julian did not reach for the door until she gathered the handkerchief and key. "Tomorrow," Marianne said, "we open the notice, the music box, and the baton." Julian inclined his head. "In that order?" She looked at him. "No, the baton first." The rosewood baton lay across Marianne's writing table before breakfast, its brass collar catching the pale light from the east window. Beside it rested the sealed notice from the trustee, the blue enamel brooch marked 27, and the music box her mother had carried through 3 lodgings and 1 winter without coal. Julian stood opposite the table and made no attempt to touch any of them. Marianne appreciated the restraint, though it made the room feel more intimate than assistance would have done. "The baton first," he said. "You remembered. You said it with authority." "I was trying not to sound afraid." Julian's gaze settled on her face. "Did it work?" "No." Marianne took the small key from her reticule. It opened the music box, not the baton, but holding it brought back the shape of her mother's hands. Margaret Elmsley had possessed narrow fingers, quick when correcting a score and unexpectedly gentle when guiding Marianne through difficult measures. Once, when Marianne was 12, she had rushed an entrance 3 times. Her mother had tapped the baton against the table and said, "Don't follow the loudest person in the room. Follow the true measure." At the time, Marianne had thought it a lesson in music. Years later, she had understood it was also a warning. She lifted the baton and turned the brass collar. It resisted. Julian reached for the oil on the writing desk, then stopped. "May I?" "Yes." He placed a single drop along the seam and stepped back. Marianne worked the collar slowly until it loosened with a faint click. A narrow compartment opened inside the handle. She did not feel triumph. She felt grief. Her mother had hidden something here and died without trusting anyone enough to speak of it. Marianne tilted the baton. A tightly rolled slip of paper slid into her palm. The edges had browned, but the writing remained legible. 3 names appeared in Margaret's hand: Mrs. Abel, Miss Cress, Mrs. Vale. Beneath them was a single line, number retained after departure. Julian read only after Marianne held the paper toward him. "Departure may mean several things," he said. "Marriage, dismissal, death, or disappearance from the public role." Marianne placed the slip beside the brooch. She knew numbers were being reused. She suspected it. "You are careful even now." I am trying not to turn suspicion into certainty because we want an answer. Marianne looked at him. Most people would tell me she was innocent. Would that help? For a moment, and afterward, it would make the truth more painful. She opened the music box. The mechanism gave one weak note before falling silent. Beneath the velvet tray lay old programs, receipts, and 2 folded letters from the society. The first program listed Margaret Elmsley as assistant music instructor. Her name had been crossed out in faded ink. Beside it, someone had written 27. Marianne touched the mark. This is what I remembered. Julian leaned closer. The same hand as the register. I do not know. She unfolded a receipt for £12. At the bottom, Margaret's signature stood beneath the words assigned by consent to nominee. The nominee line was blank. Marianne read it twice. She signed, "Yes." Do not say perhaps she was forced. I was not going to. Then what were you going to say? Julian looked at the paper. That a signature proves a hand moved. It does not always prove the signer understood what followed. Marianne closed her eyes for one breath. She taught me never to sign blank paper. People sometimes teach what they learned too late. The answer hurt because it allowed Margaret to be neither saint nor fool. Marianne turned to the next program. Marginal notes covered the lower edge in her own younger hand. Rehearse second chorus. Replace alto if fever continues. Lodging account unpaid. She frowned. This was not in the music box before. Julian reached inside his coat and withdrew another copy of the same program, carefully folded. Her notes appeared across that one as well, because I kept one. Marianne looked at him. For how long? Since the winter I first met you. Why? You had written 3 complaints in the margin, corrected the conductor's entrance, and calculated the lodging arrears beside a hymn. That is not an answer. It is the answer I had then. His voice lowered. I kept it because I had never seen anyone make a piece of paper so unwilling to lie. Marianne stared at the program in his hand. Julian had known her first, through corrections, unpaid accounts, and fury pressed into pencil. The knowledge unsettled her more than praise. You should have told me. You would have accused me of sentiment. Would I have been wrong? Not entirely. A faint warmth entered his expression, then passed. Marianne looked down at Margaret's receipt again. I sold the gold brooch that winter. I know. You said the pawnbroker sent the society a receipt. He did, and you never told me you knew. You did not sell it to be admired. No. Then I chose not to make your sacrifice part of my courtship. The sentence was quiet. It reached her with more force than the declaration at the ball. Marianne folded the old program and placed it beside the baton. The 3 names are our next step. Mrs. Vale is dead, Julian said. The trustee's notice mentions her. Marianne looked at the sealed envelope. You opened it, not until you gave permission last night. And it confirms only that Mrs. Vale's beneficiary number continued for 2 quarters after her death. Mrs. Abel is believed to be living in Clerkenwell. Miss Cress married a stationer and may be in Bloomsbury. Then we begin with Mrs. Abel. I can send someone. No Loxley livery. Agreed. No solicitor. Agreed. Mrs. Havers can accompany me. Julian inclined his head. I will arrange an unmarked carriage. Marianne gathered the paper, receipt, and brooch into her reticule. You are not coming. I assumed as much. You object. Yes. And yet the woman may speak more freely without a duke in the room. She met his eyes. You are learning. Painfully. By noon, Marianne and Mrs. Havers were seated in a narrow parlour above a glovemaker's shop in Clerkenwell. Mrs. Abel had once sung contralto in society concerts. Age had silvered her hair and thinned her figure, but her voice retained a low, resonant warmth. She refused tea and watched Marianne's reticule from the moment they entered. "You have brought something," she said. Marianne placed the blue brooch on the table. Mrs. Abel's face emptied. "Where did you find that?" "At the ball last night." "Then they have begun again." "Begun what?" Mrs. Abel looked toward the door. Mrs. Havers rose and checked the passage before closing it more firmly. "Numbers did not die when women did," Mrs. Abel said, "nor when they married, left London or found other work. A good number was kept because subscribers recognized it." "Recognized a number?" Marianne asked. "Recognized the story attached to it. A diligent widow, a grateful governess, a promising singer. The woman might change, but the tale remained useful." Marianne thought of Anne Mercer and Evelina Frost. "Who decided when to reassign one?" "The Treasurer's office. Sometimes Lady Octavia, sometimes Sir Crispin." "Did the women know?" "Not always." "Did my mother?" Mrs. Abel's eyes lifted slowly. "Margaret knew enough to be afraid." Marianne felt the words beneath her ribs. "Did she sign an assignment?" "Yes." "Willingly?" Mrs. Abel looked at the brooch. "She believed part of her annuity would keep 3 pupils housed. She said she could endure less if they were not turned out." "Did the money reach them?" "For 1/4. And afterward?" Payments continued under 27. Marianne placed the hidden slip on the table. "She wrote your name, Mrs." Abel touched the edge of the paper, but did not take it. "She asked me to remember the women, not the numbers. Will you give a statement?" "No." The answer was immediate. "I am sorry." "Do not apologize. Tell me what you choose." Mrs. Abel looked surprised. "I choose not to have my name spoken in any room connected to Stroud Society." "Then it will not be." "Even if it weakens your case?" "Yes." Some of the tension left the older woman's face. "Miss Cress kept copies of old concert rolls," she said. "She did not trust the committee to preserve alterations honestly." "Where is she?" "Little Russell Street, above a stationer's shop." "Will she speak?" "If you reach her before Crispin does." A carriage rolled slowly past the window. Mrs. Abel went still. Marianne crossed to the curtain and looked through the narrow gap. A blue crest marked the panel. The carriage continued to the corner, then stopped. A man in a dark clerk's coat stepped down and looked up at the building. Mrs. Abel moved away from the table. "You must leave." "Come with us." "No, he may question you. He has questioned me before." Marianne closed her reticule. "Then I will not make you endure him because of me." Mrs. Abel caught her sleeve before she turned. "Miss Cress kept the rolls in a tin box. If he takes that box, you will lose the dates." "What dates?" "The dates that prove your handwriting came before the numbered brooches." Marianne's pulse sharpened. "My handwriting?" Mrs. Abel released her. "Go." Marianne and Mrs. Havers descended the back stairs into a narrow alley while Crispin's clerk entered through the front. By the time their carriage reached the end of the street, Marianne understood the shape of the danger. Someone had not merely reused dead women's names. Someone had prepared to place Marianne's own hand inside the deception. By the time Marianne reached Little Russell Street, the room above the stationer's shop had already been emptied. The landlady stood in the doorway, with her apron twisted between both hands, and insisted that Miss Cress had left voluntarily. Yet the bed was still unmade, a shawl hung over the chair, and a cracked teacup waited beside the cold grate. No woman planning a journey left her only warm shawl behind in February. "Who took the box?" Marianne asked. The landlady looked toward the stairs. "A gentleman's clerk." "Whose clerk?" "He said he came with authority from the society." "Did Miss Cress go with him?" I didn't see her leave, Mrs. Havers moved past Marianne and opened the cupboard. Empty shelves, no tin box, no concert rolls. What did the clerk look like? Marianne asked. Dark coat, narrow face. He had a blue ribbon tied around a packet. The same man who had entered Mrs. Abel's building. Marianne felt the pattern tighten. How long ago? Perhaps an hour. Too late to follow. Too early to pretend nothing had happened. The landlady glanced toward the street. He said the room was being cleared for arrears. Miss Cress owed rent? Not until this morning. Marianne understood. A debt could be created as quickly as a record could be altered. She gave the landlady Mrs. Havers' card. If Miss Cress returns, send word to this address. Do not send to Stroud Society. Will there be trouble? There already is. Marianne left before anger could turn into wasted questions. She had one remaining place to go. Hanover Square Rooms had begun rehearsal for the next evening's charity concert. If Crispin was moving evidence, Lady Octavia would also be preparing a public defense. Marianne and Mrs. Havers arrived through the side entrance less than 30 minutes later. The building smelled of dust, lamp oil, and damp wool. Music spilled unevenly from the main room. A soprano sang one phrase, stopped, then began again under the conductor's impatient correction. Marianne recognized the voice before she saw the woman. Anne Mercer stood alone on the raised platform, holding a score with both hands. Her grey dress had been altered for performance with a narrow blue ribbon at the waist. No brooch showed at her throat. Crispin stood near the back wall speaking to a clerk. Viola moved between music stands with a stack of printed programs. Lady Octavia was not yet present. Marianne approached the platform. The conductor lowered his baton. Your Grace. His surprise was not pleasure. We were not expecting you. That appears to be a common condition today. Anne looked at Marianne, and fear returned to her face. The score trembled in her hands. Marianne climbed the 3 shallow steps. At the top of the first page, printed in elegant type, was the name Evelina Frost. That is not your name, she said. Anne's lips parted. It's the name on the program. It belonged to a woman reported dead 2 years ago. Anne stared at her. The color drained from her face. No. Did they tell you who she was? They said it was a performance name. Crispin's voice reached them from below. And so it is. He walked toward the stage with the calm of a man arriving to correct a technical misunderstanding. Many singers use names suited to the platform. Marianne faced him. Do many singers sign payment receipts under the names of dead beneficiaries? Anne looked at Crispin. That single glance answered more than words. The society uses continuity where appropriate, he said. Subscribers recognize certain beneficiary histories. Changing every printed name creates unnecessary confusion. For subscribers, for everyone, not for Anne. He looked at her as though the use of her real name were an inconvenience. Miss Mercer understood the arrangement. Marianne turned to Anne. Did you? Anne gripped the score. I understood that I would sing. What were you told would happen if you refused the name? Nothing. The word came too quickly. Crispin remained silent. Marianne stepped closer, lowering her voice. Anne, I am not asking whether they threatened you in those words. I am asking what you believed you would lose. Anne's eyes moved toward the door leading to the lodging office. My room. And the quarterly allowance? Anne nodded. The conductor looked away. Viola stopped beside the piano. The programs in her arms shifted. One page slid loose and fell to the floor. Marianne saw 2 names printed over the same line. Give me that, Crispin said. Viola bent quickly and picked it up. It's only a proof. Then return it. She did, but not before Marianne saw the lower entry. Evelina Frost. Beside it, in pencil, 27. Anne. Marianne said, "You may leave with Mrs. Havers. She can arrange a room for tonight." Crispin's expression sharpened. "You cannot remove a contracted performer in the middle of rehearsal. I am offering her a choice distorted by ducal influence. Julian is not here. You carry his name, and you carry authority over her lodging." Crispin came one step closer to the platform. "If Miss Mercer leaves, another singer will take the part." Anne flinched. There it was, not a threat spoken plainly, a consequence arranged so she would blame herself. Marianne looked at her. "You may stay and sing if you wish. You may leave if you wish. The room Mrs. Havers offers will not depend upon what you tell me later." Anne's breathing had become shallow. "Even if I refuse to speak?" "Yes. Even if I sing tomorrow?" "Yes." Crispin gave a quiet laugh. "You are purchasing loyalty while pretending to offer freedom." Marianne did not look at him. "No payment will come from House Locksley. Mrs. Havers will place the cost through the Widows' Lodging Committee, and I will reimburse it from the separate settlement established before my marriage." Mrs. Havers nodded once. No testimony required. Anne looked at the score. The dead woman's name seemed to hold her by the wrists. "I didn't know she was dead," she whispered. "I believe you. They said the name had dignity." Marianne felt anger rise, cold and precise. "Your own name has dignity." Anne closed the score. "Then I won't sing as Evelina Frost." The conductor's shoulders fell. Crispin's face hardened. Anne descended from the platform and handed the music to him. "Not Marianne. My name is Anne Mercer," she said. "If that isn't sufficient, neither is my voice." Mrs. Havers moved to her side. Crispin did not touch Anne, but his gaze followed her toward the door with a calculation Marianne recognized. "She will regret this," he said. "Then make certain you are not the cause." Viola approached once Anne had left. She held a folded handwritten sheet beneath the printed programs. "Your Grace," she said quietly, "there has been a change in tomorrow's order." Crispin turned. "Viola." She ignored him and extended the paper to Marianne. "This is the rehearsal roll." Marianne opened it. 4 names appeared beside number 27. 2 were crossed out. 1 read Evelina Frost. The last line had been covered by Viola's thumb. "Move your hand," Marianne said. Viola did not. "I can't, cannot, or will not." The echo of Anne's words from the cloakroom made Viola close her eyes. "Not yet." Marianne studied her face. "What are you protecting?" "I don't know whether I'm protecting anyone." "Then you are protecting the person who benefits from confusion." Crispin reached for the sheet. Viola stepped back before he could take it. The movement surprised both of them. "Give it to me," he said. "It's not complete. It is not yours." His voice lowered. "Everything in this room belongs to the society." Marianne looked at the handwritten page. Apparently, even names. The main doors opened. Lady Octavia entered in dark blue silk, followed by 2 committee women and a footman carrying flowers. She took in the abandoned platform, the closed score in Crispin's hand, and Viola standing beside Marianne. "Where is Miss Mercer?" "She chose not to sing under a dead woman's name," Marianne said. Lady Octavia did not react to the word dead. How dramatic, how accurate. Evelina Frost is a name attached to a successful beneficiary line. A dead woman is not a line. Subscribers prefer continuity. It reassures them that their generosity produces lasting results. Even when the woman changes, circumstances change. The purpose remains. Marianne looked at Viola's sheet. "Does the payment remain too?" Lady Octavia's gaze sharpened. "You have no authority to examine private roles." Then why does a rehearsal sheet contain a beneficiary number? No answer came. The two committee women exchanged a glance. Lady Octavia noticed. "Tomorrow evening's concert will proceed," she said. "There will also be a short address before the interval to correct the confusion caused by recent accusations." "Whose confusion?" Marianne asked. "The subscribers." "And who will correct it?" "A widow whose support was interrupted by another woman's interference." Crispin's expression settled into satisfaction. Marianne felt the trap before Lady Octavia completed it. "She will explain," Lady Octavia continued, "which woman truly took the benefit attached to number 27. Viola's hand shook. The folded page slipped slightly, exposing the hidden line beneath her thumb. M. Elmsley. Marianne saw it. So did Crispin. Viola covered it again, too late. Marianne's pulse slowed rather than quickened. "What does that mean?" she asked. Viola looked toward her aunt, then toward Crispin. Fear fought with decision in her face. "The receipt they mean to use tomorrow," she said, "bears your real signature." The next evening, Hanover Square rooms filled before the lamps had been fully trimmed. Subscribers arrived early, drawn by rumor more than music. The program promised a charity concert and a brief address concerning recent misunderstandings. No one needed to ask whose misunderstanding would be examined. Marianne entered beside Julian and felt conversations narrow around them. A patroness who had once praised her work rose from the chair nearest the aisle and moved 2 seats away. The gesture was small enough to remain polite. That made it crueler. Julian noticed. He did not look at the woman. He looked at Marianne. "Do you wish to sit elsewhere?" he asked. "No." Marianne took the empty chair the patroness had abandoned. "Then neither do I." He sat beside her. The choice required no announcement. Lady Octavia occupied the center of the first row in silver-gray silk, her posture flawless beneath the chandeliers. Crispin sat behind her with a leather case at his feet. Viola stood near the side curtain, holding a stack of programs she did not distribute. Anne Mercer was absent from the printed order. So was Evelina Frost. Marianne had spent the day trying to identify the receipt Viola mentioned. She had remembered signing blank receipt pages during concert seasons, when Crispin claimed delays would otherwise leave women without allowances. She had objected. He had called efficiency a form of mercy. Now she understood how easily mercy could be rewritten once the ink dried. The opening chorus began. Marianne heard almost none of it. She watched the side curtain. Julian remained still beside her, but when Crispin rose and moved toward the aisle, Julian shifted his chair by several inches. The adjustment appeared casual. It placed him directly between Crispin and the path to Marianne. He had promised not to act before her judgment. He had not promised to ignore danger. The final chord faded. Lady Octavia stood before the applause settled. "My friends," she said, "charitable work depends upon trust. Trust between subscribers and trustees. Trust between ladies who give and women who receive. When that trust is disturbed, sentiment must give way to fact." Her voice carried without effort. "No accusation will be made tonight by this committee. We ask only that one beneficiary be permitted to clarify her own experience." The wording was careful. Lady Octavia would not accuse a duchess directly. She would invite the room to do it for her. The curtain opened. A widow in black stepped into the light. Marianne recognized the woman who had stood near the rear doors at the ball. Without the blue brooch, she looked less like part of a mystery and more like a person who had not slept. Her hands gripped a sealed envelope. Lady Octavia turned toward her with public gentleness. "Please tell us your name." Ruth Bell, and the number under which you received assistance. Ruth's throat moved. 27. A murmur spread through the room. Lady Octavia raised one hand. Mrs. Bell, did the society once provide you with a quarterly annuity? Yes. Was that annuity later interrupted? Yes. Were you given a reason? Ruth looked toward Marianne. The fear in her face was real. So was the accusation when it came. I was told, Mrs. Marianne Elmsley claimed I had left London and took the benefit under my number. The use of Marianne's unmarried name moved through the room like a draught. It placed the alleged act before her marriage, before silk, before ducal protection. Crispin lowered his eyes as though the shame pained him personally. Lady Octavia asked, "Do you possess any evidence?" Ruth opened the envelope and removed a receipt. It bears her signature. She held it toward the audience. Marianne could not read the writing from her chair, but she recognized the narrow loop of the final letter. Her own hand. Pain moved beneath her ribs, cold and exact. Julian turned his gaze to her face. He did not reach for her. He did not stand. Marianne rose. "May I examine the receipt?" Lady Octavia's expression remained composed. "The trustees have already done so." "Then another examination will not injure it." Ruth did not move. Marianne stayed where she was. "Mrs. Bell, you may bring it to me if you choose." Ruth looked toward Crispin. He remained behind Julian's shifted chair, unable to approach without making his purpose obvious. After several seconds, Ruth descended the steps and crossed the room. Guests leaned away as she passed. Marianne saw the widow notice. Shame entered Ruth's face before she reached the aisle. Marianne accepted the paper with both hands. The signature was genuine, M. Elmsley. The amount was £12. Number 27 appeared above it. Beneath the payment line was an address in Lambeth. "This may be my signature," Marianne said. The room broke into whispers. Lady Octavia's fan opened once, then closed. Crispin's expression softened into sorrow. "Marianne," he said, "you need not humiliate yourself further. I am not humiliated by recognizing my own hand." She turned the receipt toward the light. "Years ago I signed receipt pages before amounts and names were entered. I was told it prevented delays." Crispin gave a weary sigh. A convenient memory. A specific one. Marianne looked at Ruth. "Did you live at this address?" Ruth glanced at the paper. "Yes." "When?" "During the winter." "Which winter?" "The one written there." "The receipt is dated May." Ruth hesitated. "I meant the spring." "The address is a lodging house for male clerks." A trustee in the front row turned sharply. Marianne had verified it that afternoon. "Did you ever live there?" Ruth's grip tightened around the envelope. "I was told the address had been entered for privacy." "By whom?" "The committee." "Which member?" "I don't remember." Marianne looked again at the date. "On the day this receipt claims you collected £12, the parish infirmary register places you in its women's ward." Ruth's face changed. Not guilt. Panic. Lady Octavia intervened. "A distressed woman may be mistaken about dates." "Then why is the document more mistaken than she is?" Marianne asked. Crispin moved around Julian's chair. Julian rose at once, not abruptly, but enough to stop him without contact. "Remain where you are," Julian said. Crispin's eyes narrowed. "You presume too much. You are approaching a frightened witness during her answer. She is being confused. Then, confusion will not be improved by pressure." Julian stayed beside the chair rather than moving toward Marianne. He created distance without taking command. Ruth looked from him to Crispin. Marianne saw the rehearsed accusation fighting with fear. "Mrs. Bell," she said, "do you still believe I took your annuity?" Ruth's lips trembled. "I was shown the receipt." That was not my question. Your signature is on it. Yes. Then what else am I to believe? The answer was stronger than Marianne expected. Ruth was not ready to surrender. Good. The room needed to see that Marianne had not extracted a confession by rank. Believe what you have reason to believe, Marianne said. But tell me one thing. What happens to your lodging if you stop saying it? Ruth went still. Crispin spoke from behind Julian. This is intimidation disguised as sympathy. Marianne kept her eyes on Ruth. You do not have to answer. Ruth's breath broke. They said the room would be restored. A whisper passed through the subscribers. Who said that? Marianne asked. Ruth looked toward Crispin. He did not move. His clerk. Lady Octavia's face remained composed, but her hand tightened around her fan. And if you refuse to speak? Marianne asked. Ruth closed her eyes. They would give it to another widow. Crispin's voice hardened. The society cannot maintain empty rooms indefinitely. She was evicted before tonight, Julian asked. Crispin ignored him. Marianne felt anger rise, but she held it behind the question. Ruth needed more. Were you promised the annuity as well? Ruth nodded. If I corrected the record, corrected it in whose favor? Mine. By accusing me. Ruth's eyes filled. I didn't know what else to do. The room had begun to shift, not toward pity, toward discomfort. Marianne could have ended the accusation by accusing Ruth as a liar. Instead, she folded the receipt and handed it back. Ruth did not take it. Keep it, she whispered. I don't want it. Marianne held the paper. Your lodging will be secured tonight, whether you speak again or not. Lady Octavia rose. With ducal money? No. Marianne looked at Ruth, through Mrs. Havers and a widow's lodging committee unconnected with House Locksley. No testimony will be required. Even if I leave now? Ruth asked. Yes. Even if I refuse to help you? Yes. Ruth's shoulders lowered by a fraction. The change was small, but the whole room saw it. Lady Octavia closed her fan. This has become intolerable. Your Grace, until the matter is settled, you must withdraw from every committee connected to this society. Marianne faced her. No. You stand under accusation. So does the system that produced this receipt. You have admitted the signature. I have admitted the truth that belongs to me. I will not admit the additions made by someone else. Crispin stepped into the aisle. Julian did not block him now because he had stopped moving toward Ruth. You have no proof that anyone altered the page. Not yet. Marianne lifted the receipt. But I have a genuine signature attached to an address the beneficiary never occupied, a payment date when she was in an infirmary, and a witness whose lodging depended upon accusation. Viola emerged from the side curtain. She carried no programs now. Mrs. Bell was brought here this afternoon, she said. Lady Octavia turned slowly. Viola. Sir Crispin chose the envelope. You approved the address. Ruth looked at her in surprise. Crispin's face hardened. You misunderstand what you saw. No, Viola said. I understood it too late. The room fell silent again. Marianne looked at Julian. He remained beside her chair, exactly where she had asked him to be. He had not spoken for her. He had made it possible for Ruth to speak without Crispin standing over her. Lady Octavia drew herself upright. This concert is suspended. The concert may continue, Marianne said, but not under borrowed names. At the side entrance, Anne Mercer appeared beside Mrs. Havers. Her face was pale, but her chin was raised. I'll sing, she said, if they print Anne Mercer. The conductor looked toward Lady Octavia, then toward the trustees. One of them nodded. Lady Octavia's control did not break. It narrowed. Very well, she said. Let the audience hear how disorder sounds when dressed as principal. Crispin moved close enough to Marianne for only her to hear. You think this receipt is the danger? His voice was almost gentle. It isn't. Marianne turned her head. What is? The private roll. His eyes moved to Julian. Ask your husband what is written beside your mother's name. Marianne looked at Julian. His face changed before he could conceal it. He had seen something grave enough that even his restraint could not hide it. And for the first time since the ball, the threat did not come from Lady Octavia or Crispin. It came from the silence between Marianne and the man who had promised not to use the truth without her consent. Julian had known before Crispin spoke, and Marianne saw it in his face. The realization followed her through the remainder of the concert, through Anne Mercer's first unsteady entrance under her own name, and into the carriage where silence settled between them like a third passenger. London moved beyond the windows in wet streaks of gold. Julian sat opposite Marianne with a sealed leather portfolio across his knees. He had not attempted to explain himself in the hall. He had not asked her to trust him. That restraint, which had once comforted her, now felt dangerously close to concealment. You saw the private roll before tonight, she said. Yes. When? An hour before the concert. Who brought it? Mr. Halford, one of the trustees. He found a copied section in the Society solicitor's strongbox. Marianne looked at the portfolio. And you read it. Only the entries he believed directly connected to you. How many? 4 pages. My mother's name? Yes. The carriage turned sharply. Julian steadied the portfolio with one hand. He did not offer it until Marianne held out hers. Show me. You should know what it contains first. Do not manage my courage. His expression tightened. I am trying to manage the order of harm. That is not your decision. No. He placed the portfolio in her hands. It is yours. The leather felt warm from his grip. Marianne broke the outer seal. Inside lay copied pages ruled in narrow columns. Beneficiary number, public name, payment name, occupation, assignment, remarks. She found Margaret Elmsley halfway down the first page, number 27. Assistant music instructor. Quarterly annuity, 1 partial assignment. Another line appeared beneath it in a different hand. Recommended by M. Elmsley. Marianne read the initials twice. This could be my mother. Yes, or me. Yes, I was 17. You were copying programs for the society by then. And signing delivery slips. Yes, she turned the page. A second assignment appeared with no nominee named. Beneath it, number 27 continued after Margaret's death. 3 different initials had been entered over the next 2 years. Ruth Bell was one. Another was Mark D. Frost. The third was only a cross. How far did you read? Marianne asked. To the end of your mother's entries. And the other names? I stopped. She looked up. Why? Because the pages contain women who did not give me permission to know their histories. You are a trustee subscriber. That does not make their need mine. The answer reached her, but anger remained. This could have protected me tonight. Yes. You could have shown the room that number. 27 continued after my mother's death. Yes, you chose not to. I chose not to save you by exposing women who had no warning and no voice in the room. The carriage wheels struck a rut. Marianne tightened her hold on the papers. And if the accusation had succeeded, then I would have stood beside you while we disproved it another way. That is a noble answer. It was not meant to be noble. Julian leaned forward slightly. It was meant to be faithful. She looked back at the copied roll. The words did not soften the risk. They made it more complicated. Did you believe I would forbid you to use it? I believed you had the right to decide. Even if my decision damaged your name, My name is not more valuable than theirs. Marianne's anger shifted. It did not vanish. It became grief. You should have told me before Crispin did. Yes, the admission came without defense. Why did you not? Because the concert began before I could reach you privately. I would not whisper your mother's name in a corridor while Crispin watched your face. She hated that the answer made sense. And in the hall, you were protecting Ruth. If I had interrupted with the role, every eye would have left her and returned to you. Marianne closed the portfolio. You decided that too. Yes, you were wrong. Julian's jaw tightened. I know. The carriage slowed before Everdon House. He reached for the portfolio, then stopped. Keep it. I do not intend to read the other names, neither do I. Marianne looked at the resealing ribbon inside the case. Julian had broken only the first seal. A second strip remained prepared. You planned to close it again, if you chose not to proceed. She took the ribbon and bound the copied pages. Julian pressed the wax when she asked. Neither spoke until the seal cooled. Inside the house, a folded newspaper waited on the hall table. A column had been marked in pencil. The beneficiary Duchess under inquiry. The paragraph described Marianne as a former charity dependent, whose rise through marriage had now become entangled with disputed annuity records. It did not accuse her outright. It did not need to. Marianne read it once and set it down. A footman entered with a note from Mrs. Havers. One former beneficiary who had agreed to speak had withdrawn after receiving an unsigned warning. Another messenger arrived before the first had left. Ruth Bell had been expelled from her lodging. Tonight, Marianne asked. Within the hour, Your Grace. Julian turned toward the door. I will send a carriage. No Locksley crest. Then none, and no payment from you. He looked at her. Marianne, Crispin will say you purchased her testimony. I do not care what Crispin says. I do. The words struck harder than she intended. Not because I value his opinion, because Ruth must know her safety does not depend upon a duke choosing to believe her. Julian's restraint thinned. Then what do you propose? Mrs. Havers's Widows' Lodging Committee can place her tonight. I will reimburse the treasurer from my separate settlement. You should not bear the cost alone. This is not about fairness between us. It should be. Not now. Julian turned away, then back. Then let me guarantee the committee's winter coal anonymously. Marianne saw the effort it cost him not to take control, without condition, and not tied to Ruth's name. Agreed. A third message arrived. This one bore Crispin's seal. Marianne opened it. Withdraw from inquiry, and Mrs. Bell will recant before the week is out. Julian read the sentence over her shoulder. He expects you to bargain. He expects me to prefer innocence over truth. Do you? Marianne folded the note. For 1 hour tonight, I did. The confession surprised them both. She walked into her sitting room and placed the sealed roll beside her mother's baton. When I saw my signature, I wanted you to stand up and end it. I wanted the room to obey you. I wanted Ruth to disappear before she could finish. Julian stayed near the doorway. That does not make you cruel. No, it makes me frightened. She touched Margaret's name through the leather cover. I am tired of being admirable only when I suffer correctly. Julian's face changed. He crossed half the distance, then stopped. You do not have to be admirable with me. Are you certain? Yes, you met me. While I was solving a lodging crisis. You respected me because I worked. You married me because I made rooms more honest. What happens when I am confused, angry, or wrong? I remain. The answer came without hesitation. Marianne looked away before it could undo her. A knock sounded. Mrs. Havers entered with rain on her cloak and worry in her eyes. "Ruth is safe for the night," she said, "but another woman has withdrawn her statement. Someone sent her husband a copy of the society register." Marianne closed her eyes briefly. The counterattack had widened. "Then we ask no one twice," she said. "Those who refuse remain unnamed." Julian picked up the sealed roll. "I can close the society tomorrow and stop Crispin from using another bed, allowance, or reference." Marianne turned sharply. "No, he is evicting witnesses. And if you close it tonight, how many women lose rooms before breakfast? We can replace every payment. With House Loxley, money, if necessary. Then the same. Dependency survives under a kinder man." Julian went still. Marianne stepped closer. "You are trying to protect them, I know, but if you destroy the structure before we separate its abuses from its essential work, women will pay for Crispin's guilt." His expression hardened against his own impulse. "You are right. That sounded painful." It was. He set down the portfolio. "What is the better choice? Temporary support through independent lodging and employment committees. No society officer controls access. We find the women who wish to speak. We ask consent one by one. And the records remain sealed until trustees examine them. You are asking for time while Crispin moves evidence. Then secure the rooms, not the women." Julian nodded once. "I will speak to the trustees tonight." Another knock came before he reached the door. The footman announced Miss Viola Stroud. Viola entered alone, soaked by rain, carrying a narrow mahogany box against her chest. Her face was pale. She set the box on the table, but kept both hands upon the lid. "I took this from the cabinet beneath the program room," she said. Marianne looked at the brass key hanging from Viola's wrist. "What is inside? The blank brooches?" Viola hesitated. "Part of it." Julian remained silent. Marianne held Viola's gaze. "Why only part?" Viola's fingers tightened on the lid. "Because I still don't know whether I came here to tell the truth or to save myself." She drew a shaking breath. "And this isn't everything." Viola kept both hands on the mahogany box as if the truth inside might escape before she had decided whether to release it. Rain had darkened the shoulders of her cloak and loosened several curls at her temples. She looked younger without Lady Octavia beside her, but not innocent. Marianne did not ask Julian to leave. Viola had brought evidence into Everdon House. Any promise made now required witnesses. "Open it," Marianne said. Viola looked at Julian. "Will his grace remain?" "That is your choice," Marianne replied. Viola hesitated, then nodded. Julian moved no closer. Viola lifted the lid. Inside, 32 blue enamel forget-me, not brooches, lay in narrow velvet rows. None bore numbers. Their blank silver backs caught the lamplight with a cold, unfinished shine. Marianne thought of Anne Mercer saying the number belonged to her only for one night. Here were dozens of identities waiting for frightened women to fill them. "How many more?" Marianne asked. "I don't know." Viola removed a brass key from her wrist and placed it beside the box. "These were kept beneath the program room. My aunt said they were ordered in advance, so no beneficiary would have to wait. And the numbers, added later. By whom?" Viola swallowed. "Sometimes by me." The admission remained between them. Marianne did not rescue her from it. "Did you know the numbers were reused?" "Not at first." "When did you know?" 3 months ago. "And you continued?" Viola looked down. "Yes." Julian's expression remained unreadable, but he said nothing. Marianne closed the lid halfway, leaving the rows visible. "You said this is not everything." Viola reached into her cloak and removed a folded sheet. "This is part of the numbering schedule. Marianne unfolded it on the table. Dates ran down the left side. Numbers and initials filled the next columns. Several entries contained short instructions. Retain public name. Replace performer. Continue payment. Number 27 appeared 4 times within 1 quarter. Who wrote these directions? Marianne asked. Sir Crispin dictated most of them. I copied the schedule. And Lady Octavia. She added notes when he was away. Marianne found one in a firmer hand. Avoid unnecessary disclosure to subscribers. Where is the rest? Viola's fingers tightened around the edge of the box. I tore away 1 page. Why? Because it named the account that received the reassigned money. Where is it now? Safe. That is not an answer. I know. Viola drew a shallow breath. I took the box yesterday. Then I lost my nerve. I went as far as the corner near Sir Crispin's office because I meant to return it. Why did you not? I saw his clerk leave with Miss Cress's tin box. Marianne felt anger sharpen beneath her ribs. Did you see Miss Cress? No. Did he? I don't know. And the missing page? I hid it before I came here. So you have brought enough to make us trust you, but not enough to prevent you from bargaining later. Viola flinched. Yes, the honesty mattered. It did not erase the choice. Marianne sat opposite her. What do you want? Protection from my aunt. From what? She controls my allowance. My parents died when I was 16. She became my guardian under the family settlement. Every household that receives me does so because she approves it. Every family considering marriage asks her opinion. And if you speak, she will cut the allowance, write to them and say, I am unstable. Will she lie? Not entirely. Viola looked at the schedule. I copied the names, I numbered the brooches. I knew enough to ask questions and stopped when the answers frightened me. Then your fear explains your conduct. It does not absolve it. I know. Do you? Marianne's voice stayed calm. You humiliated me at the ball because your aunt instructed you. You changed names because Crispin called it discretion. You watched women sign papers and told yourself you were only copying what others decided. You have spent years making your obedience look smaller than its consequences. Viola's face tightened. What would you have me do? Tell the truth without asking me to make it painless. Silence followed. Julian shifted his weight, but did not intervene. Viola looked at him. Would you protect me if I gave you the page? Julian answered only after glancing at Marianne. I would prevent unlawful confinement. I would not use my title to erase consequences you have earned. Viola looked back at Marianne. You told him to say that? No? Then perhaps I came to the wrong house. Perhaps, Marianne said, this house will not offer innocence in exchange for evidence. A knock sounded from the outer door. Mrs. Havers entered before anyone answered, Anne Mercer close behind her. Anne's bonnet was damp and her face pale. Ruth has been turned out, she said. The landlady put her trunk in the passage. Viola closed her eyes. My aunt said she would wait until morning. Your aunt promised herself convenience, Marianne said, not Ruth's safety. Mrs. Havers removed her gloves. The lodging committee has a bed, but the treasurer requires a guarantor before midnight. Marianne crossed to her writing desk. Use the settlement account. Julian spoke from behind her. The committee's coal fund is already secured. Marianne looked at him anonymously, as agreed. No mention of Ruth. None. Anne's shoulders eased. Will she be asked to sign anything? Only the lodging register, Mrs. Havers said. No statement, no condition. Viola stared at them. Even after she accused you, Marianne dipped her pen. Especially then. Why? Because the truth she tells tomorrow must belong to her. Otherwise, we have only replaced one purchaser with another. Viola's gaze moved to the blank brooches. Something in her face changed. Not relief. Decision. She opened her reticule and ran her fingers beneath the torn lining. A folded page emerged. "I hid it here," she said. "I thought if I kept one piece, neither side could destroy me." She placed it beside the schedule. Marianne unfolded it. The top half continued the numbering entries. At the bottom, transfers appeared beside a series of initials. CEP number 27 had 4 payments in the same quarter. 2 were marked transferred. One listed a name Marianne did not recognize. The last showed CEP, Crispin Elmsley Partnership, Viola said. "He told my aunt the money was being invested for women unable to manage it." Were the women informed? "Not that I saw." "Did they receive returns?" "I don't know. Do not guess." "I won't." Julian stepped closer to read, only after Marianne moved the page toward him. "This is not enough to prove where every payment went," he said. "No," Marianne replied, "but it proves the same number generated more than one payment, and some money entered Crispin's business. The books will need to be secured tonight." "By the trustees." "Agreed." Viola looked between them. "What happens to me?" "You write a statement," Marianne said, "in your own hand. You include what? You copied, what you knew, what you suspected, and what you concealed. And then you choose where to stay. Not here. If you remain at Everdon House, your aunt will say I detained you. She will say that anyway. Then do not give her evidence." Mrs. Havers considered. "The Widows' Committee has a respectable room above its office, plain, supervised, and without family privilege." Viola gave a strained laugh. "You would place me among women my aunt calls unfortunate." "They may have their own opinion of you," Marianne said. "You will have to endure it." Viola looked at the blank brooches once more. "I'll go." "Because you choose to?" "Yes." "Say it clearly." Viola straightened. "I'm leaving my aunt's house by choice. I'm giving this evidence by choice. I know I may lose my allowance and prospects." Marianne placed fresh paper before her. "Then write that first." Viola removed her gloves. Her fingers shook as she took the pen. She wrote slowly. Anne and Mrs. Havers waited near the fire. Julian left the room only long enough to send word to 2 trustees and the society solicitor. When he returned, Viola was signing the final page. "Who keeps the statement?" he asked. "Not House Locksley," Viola said. "The society solicitor, with both trustees present." "Agreed." A footman entered with a folded note. Lady Octavia had reported Viola missing. She claimed the Duchess of Everdon had enticed her niece away, withheld her from family, and exploited distress to obtain confidential property. The accusation was already moving through morning calls circles despite the late hour. Viola read the note and went white. "She began before she knew where I was." "She knew where you would go," Marianne said, "or feared it." Wheels sounded on the street below. A carriage stopped hard before Everdon House. Viola rose too quickly, knocking the pen against the inkwell. "That will be her." Marianne did not touch her. "You may leave through the garden passage with Mrs. Havers." Viola looked at the door. "And if I stay? You speak for yourself." "Will you speak for me if she says I am confused?" "No." Viola's fear sharpened. Marianne continued. "I will not repeat the mistake she made. I will stand beside you. The choice and the words must be yours." Footsteps crossed the hall outside. Lady Octavia's voice demanded entry. Viola looked at the box, the schedule, and the page she had finally surrendered. Then she folded her signed statement and placed it at the center of the table. "I'll stay." "Why?" Marianne asked. Viola drew a breath. "Because if I run now, I'll spend the rest of my life calling fear obedience." The door opened. Lady Octavia entered in a dark travelling cloak, rain shining on the shoulders. Her gaze passed over Marianne and Julian, then fixed upon the box of blank brooches. For the first time, her composure broke completely. "Viola," she said, "come home." Viola stood beside Marianne, pale but upright. "I'm not going with you." Lady Octavia's eyes moved to the torn page lying beside Crispin's initials. Her face hardened. "You have no idea what you have done." Viola looked at the rows of blank blue flowers. "No," she said. "But I finally know what I was helping you do." Lady Octavia did not move farther into the room. Her gaze fixed upon the blank brooches, then shifted to Viola's signed statement and the torn schedule beside it. The calculation in her face was swift and cold. "You have taken confidential property," she said. Viola's voice shook. "I took evidence. You took what you did not understand. Then explain why number 27 was paid 4 times in 1 quarter. Lady Octavia looked at Marianne. "You have encouraged this." "No," Marianne said. "I refuse to make her innocent in exchange for helping me." How noble, how inconvenient. Julian remained near the mantel, silent by agreement. Lady Octavia turned to him. "Your Grace, you cannot permit your wife to interfere with a charitable trust on the word of a frightened girl." Julian's expression did not change. 2 trustees have already been summoned. The society solicitor is on his way. Lady Octavia's composure tightened. "You acted before hearing my explanation. The books will provide one. You presume they belong under your authority. They do not." Julian's answer was immediate. "That is why House Locksley will not control the examination." Marianne saw Lady Octavia understand the significance. Julian had removed the argument she intended to use. No ducal seizure, no private judgment, no opportunity to claim he was destroying the society to protect his wife. "Viola," Lady Octavia said, "your allowance is governed by a family settlement. You cannot simply remove yourself from my care." Viola's fingers curled around the back of a chair. "I can choose where I sleep. You are distressed, I'm afraid." Viola looked directly at her aunt. "That isn't the same thing." Lady Octavia's eyes cooled. "You have embarrassed your family. You taught me that embarrassment was worse than wrongdoing. And you believed that? For too long." A carriage stopped outside. Moments later, the footman admitted Mr. Halford and Mr. Price, both trustees of the society, followed by Mr. Wren, its solicitor. They entered without ceremony. Mr. Halford carried a leather document case. Mr. Price held a copy of the trust deed. Mr. Wren looked tired rather than surprised, which told Marianne he had expected this reckoning for some time. Julian addressed them before Lady Octavia could. "House Locksley claims no custody over the evidence. I have asked my solicitor not to act in this matter." Mr. Wren inclined his head. "That is prudent." Lady Octavia drew herself upright. "You will not remove society records on the basis of stolen papers." "We will remove nothing tonight," Mr. Halford said. "The trust deed permits 2 trustees to inspect the rooms, prepare an inventory, and place records under joint seal when misuse is alleged. Alleged by my niece under duress." Viola stepped forward. "I'm not under duress. You are standing in a duke's house. By my choice." Mr. Wren looked at her. "Will you repeat that in writing?" "I already have." She handed him the statement. He read the first lines, then passed it to the trustees. Lady Octavia's face hardened. "You will regret allowing sentiment to damage essential work," Marianne answered quietly. "The work will continue. Your control over it may not." Within the hour, they entered the society rooms behind Hanover Square under the authority of the 2 trustees. No locks were forced. "Mr. Price used the second trustee key required by the deed. A clerk stood at the door and recorded every person who entered. Originals would remain inside until they were listed and sealed. Julian stayed close to Marianne, but touched nothing. Viola carried the brass key to the lower cabinet. Her hand trembled when she inserted it. "This is where the blanks were kept," she said. The cabinet opened. Inside lay stacked programs, a narrow order book from the enameler, and packets of payment slips tied by quarter. Crispin arrived before the inventory had reached its second page. He stopped at the threshold, saw the trustees, and masked his alarm with offense. "What is the meaning of this?" "Examination under the trust deed," Mr. Halford said. "On whose complaint?" "Miss Stroud's statement and supporting papers." Crispin looked at Viola. "You have been manipulated." "No," she said. "I have been frightened. You depended on the difference." He ignored her and moved toward the cabinet. Mr. Price closed it. "You no longer have sole access while the examination continues." Crispin's face lost color. "This is absurd. These papers contain private names." "Which will not be read beyond what is necessary," Mr. Wren said. "We begin with the documents directly connected to the disputed entries." Marianne placed no hand on the records. She only watched as 3 items were set on the central table. First came the original concert program, bearing her initials beside several performer substitutions. Second came the enameler's order book. Third came a payment transfer record marked with the initials CEP. Mr. Halford looked toward Marianne. "Do you recognize the program?" "Yes." "Are those your initials?" "Yes." Crispin gave a quiet breath of satisfaction. "Then the matter is plain." Marianne did not look at him. "Read the date." Mr. Halford did. March 4th. Viola opened the order book to the marked page. The blank brooches attached to those names were ordered on March 21st. Mr. Price looked between the 2 documents. 17 days later. "I changed performers because illness had emptied 3 places in the chorus," Marianne said. "The names were altered before any brooches existed." Crispin's jaw tightened. "That proves nothing about later administrative use." "No," Marianne said. "It proves my initials did not create beneficiary identities." Mr. Wren moved the transfer record beside the first 2 items. "And this?" Viola unfolded the torn page from the schedule. "The same reused numbers appear here. Some payments were directed to CEP Crispin, straightened. Crispin Elmsley Partnership received investments on behalf of beneficiaries unable to manage funds responsibly." "Where are the written consents?" Mr. Halford asked. "In the private roll." "Then we will inspect only the relevant entries." Crispin's voice sharpened. "You have no right to question arrangements made for vulnerable women." A woman waiting near the door stepped forward. Mrs. Havers had brought her under a plain veil. Marianne recognized her from an old concert, but did not speak her name. "May I look at that receipt?" the woman asked. Mr. Wren turned to her. "Only if you choose." She nodded. 1 payment slip was placed before her. She stared at the signature. "That is mine." Crispin's expression eased. Then she looked at the amount. "I never received £12. The room went still. "How much did you receive?" Mr. Price asked. 3. "Did you assign the remainder?" "No." Her hand shook. "I signed before the amount was written, because I was told my lodging reference would be delayed." Crispin stepped forward. Julian moved once, placing himself between Crispin and the witness without touching either man. "You will remain where you are," he said. Crispin's face hardened. "You are obstructing me in my own business." "No," Julian said. "I am preventing you from approaching a witness who has just contradicted your record." Marianne looked at the woman. Do you wish your name entered in the inventory? Not yet. Then it will not be. Mr. Wren marked her only by number. Lady Octavia, who had entered behind Crispin, studied the 3 documents on the table. You are mistaking safeguards for theft, she said. Names were altered to preserve reputations. Money was invested because many beneficiaries lacked experience. Continuity kept subscribers from withdrawing. Marianne turned toward her. Where is the consent? Some women cannot judge what serves them best. Then you did not protect their dignity. You replaced it with obedience. Lady Octavia looked at the trustees. Close the society tonight, and dozens of women will lose lodging and work. Julian answered before Marianne could. Then we suspend every operation until the books are cleared. Marianne turned to him. No. The words stopped the room. Julian looked at her. Crispin is still using rooms and allowances to control witnesses. Then remove his control. Do not remove the rooms. The risk is immediate. So is the hunger of women who will wake tomorrow without work if you close everything. Julian held her gaze. Marianne continued. An interim committee of trustees can keep lodging and wages moving. No officer connected to Crispin or Lady Octavia approves access. House Locksley does not replace them. The resistance in Julian's face lasted one breath. Then he nodded. You are right. Mr. Halford looked toward Mr. Price. The deed permits temporary administration by trustees. Then that is what we do, Mr. Price said. The books remain under joint seal. Essential payments continue through 2 signatures. Crispin looked from one trustee to the other. You cannot conduct this inquiry in secret. We will not, Marianne said. Everyone turned toward her. She placed the blue brooch, marked 27, beside the 3 pieces of proof. We will hold a formal examination at Hanover Square Rooms. Each number will be called. Women may appear, submit witnessed statements, or refuse entirely. No name will be spoken without permission. Lady Octavia's expression became almost serene. She reached into her reticule and withdrew an original program. Then begin with this. She placed it beside Marianne's initials. Let the subscribers see that the Duchess herself altered names. Marianne looked at the dates. Fear moved through her, but it no longer directed her. They will see the program, she said. They will also see the order book and the transfer record. Crispin gave a thin smile. And your mother? Julian's attention shifted to Marianne. She felt the weight of Margaret's name, the blank assignment, and the notation that might belong to either of them. Mr. Wren closed the inventory book. If the examination proceeds, those entries may become relevant. Julian's spoke quietly. Marianne, you do not have to decide tonight. She lifted her mother's rosewood baton from the case Mrs. Havers had carried. Yes, she said, I do. Lady Octavia watched her. You are willing to place your own history before the room. Marianne looked at the original program, bearing her real initials. I am willing to place the dates beside it. She turned to the trustees. Arrange the examination. Julian stepped closer, but did not touch her. Are you certain? No. Marianne held the baton firmly. But I will speak first. Do not use my name. They found me once before. The sentence stood alone in the center of the page, written in a narrow hand that had pressed hard enough to mark the sheet beneath it. Marianne read it twice before folding the letter along its original crease. Across the morning room, Mrs. Havers sorted replies into 3 piles. Those willing to appear, those willing to send witnessed statements, those who refused any use of their names. The 3rd pile was the largest. How many now? Marianne asked. 3 women will come in person, Mrs. Havers said. 7 have sent statements. 4 have refused entirely. 2 have not answered. We will not write again to those who refused, even if their evidence would help, especially then. Mrs. Havers nodded and moved the letter into the 3rd pile. Anne Mercer sat near the window, copying her own statement in a steadier hand than the first draft. Ruth Bell had agreed to appear, though she had sent word that she might lose her courage before the curtain opened. Viola worked at a smaller desk under Mr. Wren's supervision, reviewing only the portions of the numbering schedule she herself had copied. No one in the room handled another woman's name carelessly. Marianne had insisted upon that before any preparation began. Julian entered carrying the rosewood baton. Its brass collar had been tightened by a cabinet maker, but no varnish had been added and no mark polished away. He waited until Mrs. Havers, Anne, and Viola moved into the adjoining room before approaching Marianne. "You left this at Hanover Square," he said. "I was distracted. You were arranging a public examination of the people who tried to destroy your reputation. That is not a defense for neglecting my mother." Julian placed the baton on the desk between them. "It is not your mother." Marianne looked at him sharply. "No, it is something she held, something she used, something she hid a truth inside, but it is not the whole of her, and protecting it perfectly will not repair what happened." The words were careful, but they still hurt. Marianne ran one finger along the rosewood. "You make grief sound practical. I am trying not to make it sacred when what you need is room to breathe." She looked toward the sealed copies of Margaret's entries. 1 assignment, possibly 2, a recommendation signed M. Elmsley. Enough ambiguity to stain both mother and daughter. "Tomorrow they may believe I helped create the false identities," she said. "They may. You refuse comfort," with remarkable consistency. "Would you trust me if I gave it cheaply?" "No, then I will not." Julian remained standing until she motioned toward the chair opposite her. He sat. Marianne picked up the first program and the enameler's order record. "The dates are clear. My initials came first. The brooches were ordered 17 days later. Yes, that should be enough. It should. But it may not be. No." Marianne closed the book. "Lady Octavia does not need to prove I designed the scheme. She needs only to make doubt respectable. And Crispin needs the room to believe uncertainty is guilt. You understand them well. I have been listening." The answer recalled the winter program Julian had kept and the 8 months he had spent observing rather than rescuing. Marianne looked away. "There is another fear. Tell me." "No." The refusal came too quickly. Julian did not press. That made it harder to maintain. "You met me while I was solving a crisis," she said at last. "You admired me because I argued with you, found rooms for pupils, corrected accounts, and made myself useful." "Yes, the simplicity stung. What happens when I am not useful?" Julian's expression changed. "Marianne, tomorrow I may stand before 200 people and admit I do not know what my mother understood. I may be unable to prove which M. Elmsley signed the recommendation. I may be angry. I may be wrong about part of this. If your respect depends upon my always seeing clearly, then I would rather know now." Julian leaned forward, forearms resting lightly on his knees. "My respect does not depend upon perfection." "That was not my question." "No." He held her gaze. "If you are wrong, I remain. If you are frightened, I remain. If you cannot answer a room quickly enough to satisfy it, I remain. If you fail to save anyone tomorrow, I remain." Marianne felt her throat tighten. "You make remaining sound easy. It is not. Then why?" "Because leaving would be false." She looked down at the baton. The room beyond the closed doors, had fallen quiet enough that she could hear Anne turn a page. "You must understand something before tomorrow," Marianne said. "I do not want you to defend me the way you did at the ball." Julian's face became still. "Explain. You may confirm House Locksley subscriptions, dates, and patronage. You may state whether any ducal payment was tied to our marriage. You will not speak for the beneficiaries. You will not use our marriage as proof of my innocence. You will not turn the examination into a declaration of devotion." "You believe I would. I believe the room will invite you to. A romantic defense would be easier for them to forgive than an institutional failure." Julian absorbed the words without objection. "Agreed. You will not answer Lady Octavia before I do." "Agreed. If Crispin insults my mother, you will wait." His jaw tightened. "How long?" "Until I ask you not to." Silence stretched between them. Marianne saw the cost in him. Julian's instinct was not merely to protect her from physical danger. It was to remove every hand that tried to define her. Tomorrow, restraint would require more strength than command. "Agreed," he said. "And if someone intimidates Ruth or Anne, then you intervene only to create distance, not to answer." "Agreed," Marianne exhaled. "You make obedience look dignified. Do not mistake this for obedience." A faint edge entered his voice. "I am choosing to trust your judgment." "Even when I am not certain?" "Especially then." He picked up the baton and turned it once in his hands before laying it back on the desk. "There is something I should say now, because tomorrow you will have no room left for private questions." Marianne's pulse changed. "What?" Julian did not move closer. "I love you." The words were quiet. No declaration had ever sounded less like performance. Marianne stared at him. Julian continued only because she said nothing. "You do not need to answer. I am not saying it to steady you before the examination. I am saying it because you asked what remains when you are not useful." His voice lowered. "This does." Marianne felt the careful architecture of her composure weaken. She looked toward the door, then back at him. "You chose an inconvenient time." "I did not choose the time. You chose to speak." "Yes. Why?" "Now. Because silence would have made my answer incomplete." He did not reach for her. He did not ask whether she loved him. The absence of demand made the confession more difficult to escape. "I cannot answer tonight," she said. "I know. That does not mean no. I know. You sound very certain. I am trying to appear civilized." Despite herself, Marianne almost smiled. "And privately, I am preparing for a long and miserable wait." A breath of laughter escaped her. It did not erase the fear. It made the fear survivable. Julian rose. "Then I will wait." Before he reached the door, Viola entered from the adjoining room with a folded statement in her hand. Her face had gone pale again. "Lady Octavia has arranged 40 blank brooches on the stage," she said. "She means the audience to see them before any explanation." Marianne stood. "And the program?" "She will present the original bearing your initials first. She intends to make the dates look like your defense rather than the truth. Then we change the order." Viola looked at the baton. "How?" Marianne picked it up. "We begin before she does." The following evening, Hanover Square Rooms held no orchestra. The stage was bare except for a long table covered in black cloth. 40 blue enamel forget-me-nots lay upon it in perfect rows. Behind them hung the society banner. Lady Octavia sat in the first row dressed in grey silk, her hands folded over a closed fan. Crispin sat beside her with a leather case at his feet. Trustees occupied the center aisle. Former beneficiaries waited behind a screen to the left. Some prepared to step forward, others hidden by choice. Julian took the chair Marianne had assigned him at the edge of the stage, one step behind her place. He did not touch her when she passed. He only met her eyes. Marianne walked to the center, carrying her mother's baton. The audience settled into silence. She looked at the rows of blank flowers, then at the women whose histories had been arranged to serve them. Lady Octavia leaned slightly toward Crispin. Viola stood behind the trustees with her signed statement in both hands. Ruth Bell waited beyond the screen. Anne Mercer stood beside her under her own name. Marianne raised the baton once. No musicians answered. The curtain finished opening behind her, revealing every blue brooch at once. "Tonight," she said, "we will not begin with music. We will begin with names." Marianne lowered the baton, and the senior trustee rose with the sealed register in his hands. The audience remained silent. Lady Octavia's fan stayed closed across her lap. Crispin sat beside her, with one hand resting on the leather case at his feet, his expression composed enough to suggest patience rather than danger. Marianne began with number 11. A witnessed statement was opened. The woman had refused the use of her name. The trustee read only that her lodging had been tied to an assignment of half her annuity, and that a promised reference vanished when she questioned the amount. Number 19 followed. A governess in a plain grey dress stepped from behind the screen and gave her married name. Her voice trembled through the first sentence, then steadied. She had signed a receipt before the amount was entered. The society record showed £12. She had received 3. Mr. Wren placed the original beside the payment copy. The figures did not match. No one applauded. No one interrupted. Each number was called, and each woman chose whether to appear, remain behind the screen, or let a witnessed statement speak for her. With every name, the rows of blue flowers on the table looked less decorative and more like accusations. At last, Marianne placed 3 brooches marked 27 side by side. "This number did not belong to one woman," she said. "It was carried by several. One of them was my mother. Another is here tonight." Ruth Bell stepped from behind the screen. Her black dress was plain, her face pale, but she did not hide beneath a veil. She walked to the center of the stage and stopped beside Marianne. "My name is Ruth Bell," she said. The words were simple. The room heard the cost of them. Ruth held the false receipt in both hands. "I accused the Duchess because I was told my lodging would be restored if I did. Sir Crispin's clerk brought me this paper. I saw her signature and believed what they told me." Crispin rose. "Mrs. Bell has received lodging through persons connected to her grace. Her testimony cannot be called independent." Marianne did not answer for Ruth. She looked at her. Ruth drew a breath. "My room was arranged before I agreed to speak again. I was told I could remain silent and still keep it." "With money from the Duchess," Crispin said. "Through a lodging committee," Ruth replied. No statement was required. Lady Octavia looked at her with cold disappointment. "You lied before subscribers who trusted you." Ruth's face tightened. Marianne stepped forward only enough to stand beside her. "She did," she said, "and she was threatened with homelessness before she lied. Responsibility does not disappear because coercion exists. Coercion does not disappear because responsibility remains." Ruth lowered her eyes, then lifted them again. "I am sorry," she said to Marianne. "I know," Marianne replied. "The truth is still yours to finish." Ruth turned toward the audience. "I never lived at the address written on the receipt. I was in the parish infirmary on the date it says I collected £12. I never saw the money." She handed the paper to Mr. Wren and stepped back. Anne Mercer came forward next. "My name is Anne Mercer," she said. I was told to sing as Evelina Frost and sign under number 27. I did not know Evelina was dead. I was told the name had dignity and that my lodging depended on continuity. A murmur moved through the subscribers. Anne looked toward Lady Octavia. My own name was never the problem. Lady Octavia rose. This inquiry has become theatre. We are listening to women whose memories are shaped by fear and gratitude toward the Duchess. Then, let us examine paper instead, Marianne said. Lady Octavia walked to the stage, carrying the original program. She placed it on the table and pointed to the penciled initials. M.E. These are Marianne Elmsley's own marks beside altered names. She now condemns substitutions she herself made. Every face turned toward Marianne. The pressure of the room returned with such force that her fingers nearly tightened around the baton. She let them remain still. The initials are mine, she said. Crispin's expression eased. Lady Octavia's voice softened. Then perhaps we have reached the truth. Only the first date. Marianne laid the program flat. These substitutions were made on March 4th because illness emptied 3 places in the chorus. Mr. Halford opened the enameller's order book. The blank brooches connected to those names were ordered on March 21st. 17 days later, Mr. Price said. Marianne placed the payment transfer record beside them. My initials changed performers. They did not create beneficiary identities. Those came later. Viola stepped forward with the numbering schedule. Her hands shook, but she did not conceal the movement. I copied these instructions, she said. Sir Crispin dictated most of them. Lady Octavia added several notes. I tore away one page because I was afraid. I hid it until yesterday. She unfolded the missing page. This is the part I withheld. It links reused numbers to transfers marked CE. P. Crispin's face hardened. Crispin-Elmsley Partnership invested funds for beneficiaries unable to manage money responsibly. Mr. Halford looked at him. Where are the written consents? In the private roll. Mr. Wren opened the sealed section already identified by the trustees. The entries show assignments. Several nominee lines are blank. Blank does not mean improper. Then show the women where the returns were paid, Marianne said. Crispin looked toward the records. He did not answer. The governess in grey stepped forward again. My signature is there. I never received a return. Another voice came from behind the screen. Neither did I. Then a third. Lady Octavia raised her chin. Some women could not be trusted with larger sums. The society preserved what they would have lost. Without telling them, Marianne said, we preserved reputations as well, by replacing names, by protecting continuity. Continuity for subscribers, Marianne said, not for the women. Crispin moved toward the table. Julian rose from his chair and placed himself between Crispin and the witnesses. He did not touch him. You will remain where you are, he said. You have no authority here, Crispin replied. No, Julian said. The trustees do, Mr. Price stood. Sir Crispin, your access to the society's funds is suspended pending examination. You will surrender all keys. Crispin laughed once, without humor. On the word of frightened women and a duchess defending her name. On records under seal, Mr. Price said. The books will remain in joint custody. Mr. Wren will prepare the evidence required for proceedings to recover funds. The allegations will be laid before a magistrate. No conviction was declared. No theatrical punishment followed. The absence of spectacle made the decision heavier. Crispin removed the keys from his pocket and placed them on the black cloth. His hand was steady until the final key left his fingers. Mr. Halford turned toward Lady Octavia. Your resignation as chair is required. Lady Octavia looked across the room she had ruled for years. Several committee women lowered their eyes. Without me, this society will collapse. Marianne looked toward the screen where women had waited to decide whether their own names were safe. Then it was built around the wrong person. Lady Octavia's gaze sharpened. You speak as though these women created the institution. Their need created its purpose. Their labor sustained its concerts. Their stories filled its subscription books. You merely persuaded yourself that control was the same as service. Viola stood several feet away from her aunt, pale but upright. Lady Octavia looked at her. You have destroyed your future. Viola's voice trembled. No, I have only stopped letting you decide what it is. Lady Octavia sat without another word. Marianne turned to the final sealed page. Margaret Elmsley's name waited there. Her mother's signature remained real. So did the blank nominee line. So did the notation that might refer to either Margaret or Marianne. There is one more account, she said. The room quieted again. My mother received an annuity from this society. She later worked as an assistant music instructor. She signed at least one assignment and perhaps two. I do not know whether she understood every use made of her signature. Crispin found enough strength for one last attack. The recommendation bears M. Elmsley. Your initials, or hers, Marianne said. I was 17 and copying music for the society. I will not ask anyone to ignore the ambiguity because I am a duchess. She placed the page beside the brooches. My mother may have chosen between two harms. She may have believed less money for herself would keep other women housed. She may have trusted an explanation she should have questioned. I will not make her a saint by hiding what she signed. I will not make her guilty by pretending pressure did not exist. She looked at the subscribers who had once admired the clean stories printed in their programs. I was poor. I worked. I received help. I gave help. None of those truths makes me anyone's charity possession. No applause followed. It would have reduced the moment. Instead, Mr. Halford signed the resolution establishing interim control by trustees unconnected with House Locksley. Mr. Price signed beneath him. Names were entered only where consent had been given. Anonymous statements remained anonymous. Essential lodging and wages would continue under two signatures while the books were examined. Only after every woman had finished did Julian step forward. No ducal payment purchased this marriage, he said. I asked Marianne to marry me because I respected her judgment and wished for her company. House Locksley did subscribe to this society. We gave money and asked too few questions. That failure is mine. He said nothing more. He did not turn love into evidence. He did not make himself the hero of a room Marianne had reclaimed. When the final subscriber left, the stage looked smaller. The brooches remained on the black cloth. Crispin's keys had been sealed in an envelope. Lady Octavia had departed without Viola. Ruth and Anne left through the side door with Mrs. Havers, each under her own name. Marianne stood alone for a moment at the center of the empty hall, the baton still in her hand. Julian approached only when she looked toward him. She held it out. You should keep this tonight. He looked at the rosewood, then at her. It was never mine to give back. 6 months later, Anne Mercer stood at the front of a sunlit music room in Brighton and sang under her own name. The first phrase trembled. The second held. By the third, the women seated before her had stopped glancing toward Marianne for reassurance. They were listening to Anne. That was the point. The Brighton Rooms for Music and Employment occupied the upper floor of a respectable building 1/2 mile from the sea. Its windows looked over a narrow street where tradesmen, widows, governesses, and ladies passed without needing permission to belong there. No ducal crest marked the entrance. No portrait of Marianne hung above the piano. A brass plate beside the door read simply, "Brighton Rooms for Music and Employment." The committee had chosen the name. The committee also examined every subscription book, required 2 signatures for payments, and recorded wages beside actual names, unless a woman herself requested privacy. House Loxley had contributed 1 subscription. It had not been allowed to control anything. Anne finished the exercise and lowered the score. "Again tomorrow," Marianne said. "Your breathing failed before your voice did." Anne smiled. "That's less flattering than applause. It is also more useful." "Then I'll endure it." Near the doorway, Ruth Bell handed a room key to a newly arrived widow. Ruth now served as a paid lodging clerk. The work suited her. She remembered what questions felt like accusations and which silences meant fear rather than refusal. "The room is yours for 3 nights, she told the woman. "After that, we'll discuss what you need. You don't owe anyone a story before supper." The widow closed her fingers around the key. Relief moved across her face so quietly that most of the room missed it. Marianne did not. Neither did Ruth. On the far wall, an open subscription book rested beneath glass when not in use. Any subscriber could inspect the entries during appointed hours. No amount appeared without the name of the fund, the purpose, and 2 signatures. The arrangement was slower than Lady Octavia's system had been. It was also harder to steal from. Crispin's partnership had been placed under examination by solicitors acting for the trustees. Proceedings for recovery had begun. Evidence had been laid before a magistrate, and several disputed transfers were being traced. Nothing had been resolved quickly. Marianne had learned to distrust quick justice almost as much as polished charity. Crispin no longer controlled a single account, reference, room, or allowance that mattered before any final judgment did. Lady Octavia had resigned from the society and removed herself to Bath. Her circle had narrowed. Invitations arrived less often. She had written Marianne once, insisting that history would understand the necessity of firm administration. Marianne had returned the letter unopened. Viola lived in modest rooms near Bloomsbury. Her allowance had been cut. Several marriage prospects had vanished. She spent mornings helping the trustees reconcile records and afternoons copying correspondence for a small wage under another employer. Her restitution work remained unpaid by agreement. Once a month, she sent Marianne a letter. She did not ask to be forgiven. She reported what she had found, what she had done, and what still needed correction. That was why Marianne answered. Margaret Elmsley's entry had also been corrected. The record now carried her true name, her work as an assistant music instructor, the annuity she received, and the assignments she signed. No one had erased the ambiguity. No one had turned her into a saint. Marianne found more peace in that than she would have found in innocence, invented after death. "Your Grace." Miss Larkin stood beside the piano, holding the rosewood baton with both hands. She was 17, earnest, and terrified of conducting 6 women through a simple chorus. "Yes, I don't think they will follow me. They may not." Miss Larkin stared at her. Anne hid a smile behind the score. Marianne continued. "Then you begin again. What if I lose the measure? Listen for it. The room may still have it even when you don't. Will you stand beside me?" Marianne looked at the baton. For years, she had treated it as though damage to the wood would become another injury to her mother. Now the brass collar still bore the faint mark where it had once been opened. The handle had darkened with use. It looked less like a relic and more like an instrument. "I'll stand where you can see me," she said. "I won't lead." Miss Larkin took her place. The first entrance failed. One singer came in early. Another missed the note entirely. Miss Larkin lowered the baton in mortification. "Again," Marianne said. The second attempt held for 5 measures. The third reached the end. When the final chord settled, Miss Larkin looked astonished. The baton slipped slightly in her damp fingers. She caught it before it fell. Marianne did not move to help. "Keep it until next week," she said. Miss Larkin looked down at the rosewood. "But it belonged to your mother." "Yes. What if I mark it? Then it will have been used." The girl nodded and carried it carefully to the music stand. The lesson ended in the usual disorder of folded scores, exchanged addresses, and questions about employment notices. Anne remained to help a younger pupil with breath control. Ruth locked the lodging register and placed the key on her belt. One by one, the women left. Marianne was correcting a notation in Miss Larkin's exercise book when she noticed Julian seated in the last row. He wore a dark traveling coat without insignia. No secretary stood beside him. No servant announced him. He had been there long enough to hear Anne sing and Miss Larkin lose the measure. "How long have you been watching?" Marianne asked. Julian rose. "Long enough to see you refuse to rescue someone from 6 imperfect measures. You approve? I am learning to keep approval from sounding like ownership." Slowly, painfully, Ruth passed him on her way out and gave a respectful curtsy without losing possession of the lodging keys. Julian inclined his head. After the door closed, the room grew quiet except for Anne's voice in the adjoining chamber. She was singing her own name into the first line of a new exercise. Julian came to the piano but stopped several feet away. "Mericombe is prepared for winter," he said. "The west roof repaired. The tenant school, a new stove and 2 windows that no longer admit rain. Your ward has written 3 letters accusing Brighton of stealing you." Marianne smiled. "She has learned drama from excellent sources." Julian rested one hand on the back of a chair. "Will you return with me next week? For how long? As long as you choose. And if I wish to come back here after Christmas, then we come back." "We? I can divide my time." Marianne studied him. 6 months earlier, he would have calculated the efficient arrangement first. Now he waited for her answer before building the plan. "I want both," she said. "Mericombe is home. This work is mine. Then we keep both. You make that sound simple. It is not simple. It is merely worth arranging." The answer settled warmly inside her. Julian looked toward the adjoining room where Anne had begun the passage again. "You never answered me." Marianne knew at once what he meant. "You were patient. I was privately miserable as promised." "Only privately. My valet has submitted concerns." She laughed softly. Julian's expression changed as he listened. He did not step closer. He had learned that restraint could be an offering, not a distance. Marianne closed the exercise book. "I did not answer because I needed to know whether love would become another reason for you to decide what was best for me. Has it? No. That is encouraging. Do not become vain. I'm a duke. The risk is structural." She crossed the space between them before she could lose courage and placed her hand in his. Julian's fingers closed gently around hers. He did not pull her nearer. He waited. "I love you," Marianne said. The words did not feel like surrender. They felt like a decision finally spoken aloud. Julian's breath changed. "Marianne, not because you defended me at the ball. Not because you believed me when the receipt bore my signature. I love you because you learned when to step forward and when to remain beside me, without standing in my path. I am still learning. So am I. Then perhaps we will be tolerable together. That may be ambitious. His smile was brief and unguarded. Marianne looked toward the music stand where the rosewood baton rested beneath the afternoon light. There is one condition, only one, for today. Name it. Home must not erase work. Agreed. Work must not erase home. Agreed. Truth before comfort. Always. Permission before intervention. Julian considered. Unless a carriage is moving toward you at great speed. I will allow practical exceptions. Generous. She tightened her hand around his, and neither of us uses love as evidence that the other cannot be wrong. His expression softened, agreed. From the adjoining room, Miss Larkin began the chorus again. The first entrance failed. Anne stopped her gently. A moment later, the baton struck the stand once, and they began again. This time, the voices found one another. Marianne and Julian stood listening until the measure held. Then she led him toward the door, not because he had asked, but because she had chosen the moment to leave. Behind them, the rosewood baton remained on the music stand in a room where no woman needed to borrow another woman's name.